Good morning, welcome. Chapter 41, verse 1 in Bereshis in Genesis, continuing with the story of Joseph, who, as we learned, just completed his 10th anniversary of languishing in Egyptian prison. And now we read that by Yehi it came to pass, Mikeitz shnosayim yomim, at the end of 2 more years. So now it's not 10 years, but it's 12 years, 10 plus 2, because the butler came out and Joseph asked the butler, remember me to Pharaoh. Tell him there's this great guy who's imprisoned. And the butler, of course, not only didn't remember, but he also forgot. So Joseph languished for 2 more years in prison. It came to pass at the end of 2 more years. And now Pharaoh has a dream. And Pharaoh dreams. What is his dream? And behold, in his dream, he was standing by the river. Doesn't say here clearly what river. My guess would be the Mississippi. Rashi, Vayehi Miketz, Kitagumai Misayf at the end. V'cholosh and Ketz, Seifu, Ketz means end. Al Hayair, which river, says Rashi? Kol Shar Nahores, all the other rivers. Einom Kruyim Yair, are not called Yair in that region. A river is called Nahar. What is Yaor? Yaor is the river. What is the river in Egypt? The Nile. Chutz min Nilois, with the exception of the Nile River. The Nile is that special river that brings the blessings of irrigation to Egypt. Because the entire country is formed into little man-made riverlets which guide the water of the Nile into people's farms. But the Nile rises into them, and that is how Egypt gets irrigated from the water of the Nile. And when I was a kid, I asked my teacher, and where does the Nile get the water from? So my teacher said, from all the mountainous areas surrounding that region, and that's the whole idea of irrigation, that the water comes from far away, flows into the river rises and irrigates, sort of like Los Angeles gets its water from the rains up north. It never has to rain in Los Angeles, by the way, because we don't do anything with the water. We get our water from up north, so the whole LA is one big, have the LA River. That's like the Nile. Not quite. So the Nile rises into them, and waters them. Why? Why do we need a Nile rising? Why can't it just rain? Because it doesn't rain usually in Egypt. Tadir on a regular basis, like other lands. Therefore, Egypt functions on an irrigation system. So the Nile was the deity, it was the god of Egypt. Everybody worshipped the Nile. The Nile was like the stock market. The Nile gave everybody its food. It was the center of the economy. So if Pharaoh's going to have a dream about the economy, he's going to be standing on Wall Street. He's standing in front of the Nile. Verse 2, and behold, in his dream, out of the river, come forth, Sheva Pores, 7 cows. Yefes Mara, gorgeous cows. Ovries Basar, with healthy flesh, abyssal obese. Vatirena Ba'ochu, and they were pasturing in the reed grass. They were having a good time, these 7 cows. Rashi 2, Yefes Mara, what is the significance of gorgeous cows? Simon Huli Meseva. Remember, Joseph is going to interpret these dreams to mean that the 7 cows are 7 years of plenty. To quote Greenspan, irrational exuberance. 7 years of irrational exuberance. Shahabrias nirais yafezulazu, where when there is irrational exuberance and everybody's happy, then one creature looks great even next to the other. Shein ayin bir yatzara b'chaberta, because the eye of one person is not jealous over the other. Somebody was once learning in the good books about Messianic times. It says that when Mashiach comes, there will be ma'adanim, mitzuyim ka'ofar. All the delicacies in life will be plentiful and available. Like today, there are pebbles on the beach. So one guy said, that's not good. That means everybody will have it. I want to be the only guy on my block to have it. What good is wealth if everybody's wealthy? If everybody can afford to vacation in Dubai, then well, how am I special? The idea of the 7 fat cows is that there was no jealousy. There was enough plenty for everyone, and everyone was happy. Ba'achu ba'agam in the bulrush and the reeds. Marish in Old French, Kamei Yizge Achu, Medakis Bosar. That's the next verse. Okay. The Baal HaTurim here says that the word Miketz tells us, just as with Abraham it says, Vahi Miketz Eser Shonim was the end of 10 years, so also this was the end of 10 years. We've been talking about 10 years only because the oral law teaches it to us. But the Baal HaTurim says that this is the source, the use of the word Miketz, that Joseph first languished in prison for 10 years and then another 2 years. Vayihi, Miketz, Nasayim, Yomim, Ufare, Chelim, all of that has a numerical value of Eser Shonim, 10 years. Now, verse 3, Vihine, and behold, in his dream, there now come, Sheva Pores Acheres, 7 other cows. Oiles are ascending, Achareim, after them, Minayaer, also from the river. But these cows, they are emaciated. Rois Mare, they look terrible. Vedakes Bosar, they're very lean of flesh. To quote Jackie Mason, "Zublujetum zahargit." And they stood Eitzel Hapores next to the other cows, Al Svasayir on the edge of the river. So all of this is unfolding in Pharaoh's dream. 7 gorgeous cows coming out of the river, or standing near the river, and then there comes out of the river 7 lean, terrible-looking cows, and they stand next to the healthy-looking cows. And now we break for commercial. No, just kidding. Okay, verse 4. And now the cows. Which cows? Rois Hamara, the awful-looking ones, Vidakes Abosar, and the emaciated ones, 8. Eis Sheba Haporos, the 7 cows. Which cows did they eat? Yefes Hamara, the beautiful ones. Vahabrias, and the healthy-looking ones. Vayikatz Pari, and Pharaoh woke up and he said, what a terrible dream. Lean, emaciated cows coming out of the Nile, consuming healthy-looking fat cows. This is not a good thing. I wonder what it means. In the interpretation later, we hear, and now we can think back to the dream, says Rashi, that Simon, this would be a sign, because Joseph interprets it as 7 lean years, following 7 years of plenty, that all of the joy of the plenty, nishkachas, will be forgotten, b'meharav, in the days of the famine. That is one dream. Immediately, 5, Pharaoh quickly pops some Prozac, and Vayishan, he falls asleep again with some sleeping pills. Vayachlem Shenis, and he had another dream. V'hine, and behold, Sheva Shibolim, in this second dream, there were 7 ears of corn or wheat. Eiles Bekona Echad, growing up, ascending on one stalk. Bries Beteves, wonderful, healthy-looking wheat coming up. 7 ears coming up. So a very healthy-looking growth of produce. Bekona Echad, says Rashi, Tudul Belaz in Old French. Tuya, Bries, saints in Old French. 6, V'hine Sheva Shibolim Dakas Ushtufas Konim, and continuing with the second dream, there are 7 ears blasted by the east wind, which are sprouting forth after them. Ushtufes, hails in Old French, from Kidum blasted with the east wind, Chabutes beaten, like the lintel on top of the door is always beaten by the door, which keeps slamming against it. Kodim Ruach Mizrach is the east wind. Shekerin Baisa, that's what we call the Santana winds here coming from the east. 7, Vativlana Ashibolam Adakas, and in his dream, these 7 emaciated ears of grain, of corn, swallow up, Shem Ashibolam, the 7 stalks, Habrias, the healthy ones, Mamleas, the full ones, Vayikatz Pari, and Pharaoh wakes up, and again it's a dream. Habrias, saints in Old French, he now has a complete dream, he now needs a good interpreter, because he has no idea what the dream means. There's a talk which the Rebbe gave, comparing Joseph's dreams to Pharaoh's dreams. Joseph was a visionary. Joseph was a great spiritual leader. Joseph was a tzaddik. Joseph was an incredible human being. His first dream was about the brothers and he bundling bundles of wheat, and then their bundles bow down to his. That was the first dream. So the first dream, good morning, says the Rebbe, is about the vegetable world, about food. And then Joseph has a second dream. It's the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowing down to him. It's about the heaven. Joseph, being a righteous person, he goes from earth to heaven. And that's his mission in life, to elevate things from earth, to take the material and make it spiritual, to take earth and make heaven out of it. Pharaoh's dream are both about earth. One is about cows, and the other is about food, about grain. Except that in the world itself, in this world itself, there are 4 levels. There is the lowest, which is the inanimate, then there's the vegetable, then there's the animal, then there's the human. Pharaoh goes on a downward spiral. He first dreams about cows, which are the animal world, and then he goes down and dreams about the vegetable world, about ears of corn. So that juxtaposes the value system of Pharaoh and Yosef. Yosef goes from earth to heaven, and Pharaoh goes from the animal world down to the world of the vegetable world, always going in a downward spiral. That's just a parenthetical observation, comparing the dreams of Yosef, 2 dreams, and the dreams of Pharaoh, 2 dreams. That's from a talk of the Rebbe. Verse 8. And it came in the morning, and his heart was clopping, his spirit was troubled. He was not a happy camper. And he sent for, and he called for, as kol chartumei Mitzrayim, all of the magicians and spiritualists of Egypt, as kol chachamei, all of the wise men. And Pharaoh related his dream to them. There were a lot of interpretations, as Rashi says, but none of them felt right to Pharaoh. None of them were satisfactory to Pharaoh. You'll never find a wise man without an answer. Everybody has an answer, but it wasn't the right answer. His spirit was agitated. His soul, his heart was ringing within him like a bell. Now, there's another biblical dream. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. And there it says the word not vatipoem, but vatispoem, a double expression. Because in the case of Nebuchadnezzar, he had a double clanging of the heart. Because Nebuchadnezzar had one more level of complication. At least Pharaoh woke up, he remembered his dreams. Nebuchadnezzar said, I had a terrible dream, but I can't remember it. He called his wise men and said, you must tell me my dream. And when they didn't, he just shot them. Shichas hachalein, forgetting the dream, and then the concealment of the interpretation. Good morning. The people who worked with the bones of the dead, people who consult the bones of the dead, the word time means bones, of a mishnah, so all types of idolatrous magicians. They did interpret, not satisfactory to Pharaoh. Their voice did not sit right in his ears. He had no peace of mind with their interpretation. Some of the things they said, you're going to have 7 daughters. You're going to bury 7 daughters. So what? It didn't sound like it fit into the whole flow of the dream. If you think about Joseph's interpretation, he's standing by the Nile. It's the source of the economy. There are good cows swallowed up by lean cows. Good years. It's perfect. But the other interpretation just didn't sit right with him. Verse 9. Now, remember the butler? 2 years earlier, he was in prison. Joseph positively interpreted his dream, and he forgot about Joseph. Why? There's a whole talk which the Rebbe gives about this issue. The Rebbe says that as we look into the oral law, we find that the butler, the baker, and Potiphar, they were all aligned. They were all friends in the inner cabinet of Pharaoh. And as much as Potiphar hated Joseph, that's how much the butler and the baker hated Joseph. So they were not friends. He forgot Joseph because he hated Joseph. But now he figured he can get a promotion. What don't you do it for a promotion? So by Daber Saramashkim, the butler goes on and he speaks, as Pari to Pharaoh, saying, Es chatoy ani maskin hayim. I'm sorry to bring up my transgressions today. I don't want to talk about bad times, but I think I have to. Way back when, a couple of years ago, three years or so ago, because 2 years passed, and we learned that the butler spent a year in prison. So it was 3 years earlier. The Pharaoh became angry at his servants. And he placed me b'mishmar, under guard, under the warden, under the care of the warden of the prison. It was me and my colleague Olav Shalom, and the baker. May he rest in peace. So we dreamed a dream. On one night, I and my colleague, the baker, and you know what? Our dream was exactly according to its interpretation, which my man in prison there interpreted. 11 It was a dream. It felt like it needed interpretation, and it was in fact interpreted, and it was similar to its interpretation. Sometimes an interpretation to a dream is squeezed, it's pressed. This was natural sounding. Who did the interpreting? Said the butler to Pharaoh. I'm glad you asked. Visham Itonu 12, and there with us, and here Rashi in the commentaries point out that the butler described Joseph in the most insulting, condescending, hurtful way. Nar, this young kid. Nar means not too bright, not the brightest bulb on the lamp. Ivri, he was a Jew. Eved l'sara tabochim, he was a slave. He was a servant to the captain of the guard. He wasn't an employee. He was one of the prisoners. But we told him our dream. And you know what? Surprise, surprise. He interpreted for us our dreams. And you know what? Each one of us, according to the interpretation that happened, that is exactly what he said. Rashi 12, Nar, Ivri, Eved, says Rashi from the oral law, Arurim, Harshoyim, may the wicked people be cursed. Wicked people are so wicked, even when they're doing something good, they're wicked. He finally mentions Joseph, he has to insult him along the way. Nar means shaita, he's a fool. In case you're thinking of promoting him, Pharaoh, I want you to know the guy's an idiot, but he's a pretty good dream-interpreting idiot. Ivri, he's a Hebrew. He doesn't even speak a good Egyptian. As they used to say when I was a kid, he speaks with an accent. Evet, v'kosav b'nimuse, that's an original, all right? V'kosav b'nimuse Mitzrayim, it says in the statutes of Egypt, in the rule books of Egypt, she'ein eved melech, that a slave cannot reign. A slave cannot wear the garb of kings. So Pharaoh, in case you're thinking of coronating him king, no such thing. It's amazing that his interpretation was very close to his content. So here, the butler has a very serious challenge. He has to make Joseph sound smart, but not too smart. So he described him like an idiot savant, like a very smart idiot. That's the description that the butler gave about Joseph. And he says in 13, Vayehi, it came to pass, Kasher Posar Lonu, exactly as he interpreted for us. Kain Hoya, it's exactly what happened. It's amazing. Lord, it's a miracle. Oisi Heishi Balkani. I was restored to my office. I became the chief butler again in charge of security. As we talked in yesterday's portion, that back then assassinations happened by and large through poison. So the chief butler had to be the chief of the CIA in charge of security. The AC Sola and my man, the baker, was hanged, exactly as Joseph interpreted. Rashi 13, Heishi Balkani. Rashi's comment here is to say that this verse speaks in a style of an abridged version of the story. The same Pharaoh mentioned above. It's a shortened form. Heishi doesn't specifically say who, because it doesn't have to. The one who can. This is a style of the verses. They speak in abridged terms. Whoever can do it does it. Obviously, the one who can restore, restored, and that is Pharaoh. There is a Balaturim here who says, Kasher Posar. The Balaturim says that this alludes to, we have a whole section we learned in the Talmud, Tractate Brachos, that dreams follow their interpretation. That you always have to interpret dreams in the positive vein, because whatever the interpretation is, usually the dream follows the interpretation. And this was a whole shocking section in the Tractate of Brachos. There were two guys who had the identical dream, and they went to the same interpreter. One paid and the other didn't pay. One got a good interpretation, the other got a bad interpretation, and they came true until finally he became murderously angry because he had so much loss due to those interpretations just because he gave him a bad credit card. So the Balaturim here says, Kasher posar, bigematria, dreams follow the mouth. Dreams follow the verbiage of their interpretation. That's why nowadays when somebody comes and says, oh, I had a terrible dream, there's a whole section in certain Sidurim called Hatovas HaCholam, where three people get together and they make the dream good. And the expression that we say to the person who has a bad dream, three people get together and say 3 times in Aramaic so that they understand. Chelma tova chazaisa, chelma tova chazaisa, chelma tova chazaisa. I'll translate in Spanish. A good dream you saw, a good dream you saw, a good dream you saw. The interpretation is a good dream you saw. You saw a good dream. So that dreams must be interpreted for the good, because the verbiage of the interpretation is critical to what actually happens, and that is alluded to in these words in 13. As he interpreted for us, that's what happened. 14, Vayishlach Pari, and Pharaoh sent for, Pharaoh said, this is fascinating. Let's get this young man here. Maybe he can help me. Vayikras Yosef, so he gave the order to bring Yosef. Vayiritzu min habur, they schlepped him out of the pit. Yosef was in prison. They schlepped him out of the pit. They said, come on, Pharaoh is waiting for you. And he says, I'm not going until I clean up. I clean up real good, said Yosef. He says, I want a bath, I want a schwitzbad, I'll take a haircut, a manicure, a new suit, and then I'll go to Pharaoh. And that was, Yosef insisted upon that. By Yagalach, and he took a haircut, he cut his hair. By Yachalef Simleisov, he changed his suit. He went to Brooks Brothers. By Yovei El Pari, and he came to Pharaoh, he was gorgeous. It says that what happens if, God forbid, somebody's unemployed, he loses his job and he doesn't have anything, what should he do? He should borrow money, he should buy a new suit, he should get a nice attaché case and walk in and look like a success. And that's what Yosef did. He walked in, he says, hi, I'm from the prison. Anybody call me? I'm the good-smelling plumber. Guaranteed. 14, Rashi, min aber, min beis haseir, from the prison. Shuasi min guma, it's like a pit. That's why they call it the pits. Chen kol bear, shebemikra loshen guma, who bear means pit. V'afim mein by mine, even though there's no water, kori bear is called bear. Fusa in Old French. Why did he take a haircut if they covered Malchus? Because it says in Halacha that we have to give honor to royalty. Yosef could not see himself coming before Pharaoh unless he was dapper, unless he was gorgeous. And if you want to know the rest of the story, please join us mañana. Good morning. Welcome. The second portion for the portion of Miketz, Monday's portion, chapter 41, verse 15. Pharaoh had this dream, followed by another dream. He woke up agitated, would be an understatement, and he needed the best dream interpreter money could buy. The butler fesses up and says, when I was in prison a couple years ago, there was a guy named Joseph. Boy, did he interpret dreams. 15, so Joseph is dragged out of prison, puts on a gorgeous suit, takes a haircut, and stands before Pharaoh. Vayomer Paro el Yosef, Pharaoh says to Yosef, it's like this. Chaloim chalamti, I had a dream. Ufeiser ein eise, but there is no one to interpret this dream for me. So I'm in a quandary. Vani and I, shamati yolecha, I heard about you, lemor saying, tishma chalom, you know how to listen to a dream, lifter eise, with the intent of properly interpreting it, so therefore you think you can help me out? Rashi 15, tishma chalem, lifter eise, tazin, you know how to hear. V'savin, and you know how to understand. Chaleim, a dream, lifterese, to interpret it. The word tishma here doesn't mean listen, but it means lashon habana v'hazon. It means to hearken, to understand, to comprehend. Yosef understands. There it meant they didn't know that Yosef understood Hebrew, as the brothers spoke in front of Yosef later. Asher le sishma l'shene, it means do not understand his language. Entendre in Old French. So that was what Pharaoh said to Yosef. Can you please be my dream interpreter? 16, in his traditional pattern of humility, Vayan Yosef es Paro. Yosef responds to Pharaoh, Lamar saying, Be or die, it's not me. Elikim, it is God, Yaneh, who will answer and bring about as Shleim Pare, the peace and welfare, peace of mind of Pharaoh. Rashi 16, Be or die, Ein hachochma mishali. It's true, guilty as charged. I know how to interpret dreams, but it's not me. Elikim Yaneh, God will respond. Yitin, he will place anoya, an answer, bifi, into my mouth, which will bring about lishleim Pharaoh, or as Rashi says, regarding the welfare of Pharaoh. So that's the message of go ahead, the signal of go ahead, for Pharaoh to begin relating his dream. And here we see in verse 17, Vaydaber Paro el Yosef. So Pharaoh relates, he speaks to Yosef. And he says, Bachalomi, in my dream, Hineni omed al sfas hayair. Behold, I am standing at the edge, at the brink of the river. We talked yesterday that the river was the source of economic blessings for Egypt. It would be like somebody having, like Bernanke having a dream and saying, I was standing on Wall Street. The Nile River was the Wall Street of Egypt. And behold, out of the river, Eiles come forth, Sheva pores, 7 cows. Brias basar, very healthy of flesh. Bifeis tayar, beautiful to look at. Vatirenu, and they pastured and fed ba'ochu in the reed grass, and everything was wonderful. 18, Vihine, but behold, Minayair, out of that same river, Eiles were coming forth, Sheva pores, 7 cows. I just read that. I was just testing to see if anybody's listening. Vihine Sheva pores acheres, and behold, it looks like one person, no, I'm just kidding. And behold, 7 other cows, Eiles achereim, came forth after them. Dales, poor, verois, and very ugly looking, ugly. Rois tayar ma'ed, very bad form. Verakes basar, emaciated of flesh, just lean and mean. Later, isi chahena bechal eretz mitzrayim. I have never seen such emaciated cows in the entire land of Egypt. Lareya, I mean, these were bad cows. 19, dales kechushes, tzablushet and sahargit, lean. Kemei madu ata kochadal, why are you becoming leaner? The Amnon, when Amnon wasn't feeling right. Verakes basar, kolosh and akish, v'mikach sedi basar, it means lacking flesh. Ovelaz, fluet. Verse 20, and in my dream I saw that vatechalna hapores, harakes v'harois, that the cows, the bad cows, the lean cows, consumed, they ate. Sheva hapores, Sorishain is the 7 first cows, Habrias, the healthy ones. Now what was even scarier, says Pharaoh to Yosef, is that Vatavene el Kirbeno, they entered within them, and it could not even be recognized, Kivo el Kirbeno, that they had gone into them. Such a fat cow goes into a lean cow, and the lean cow is just as lean. Umarei and Ra, and they look horrific, terrible, kasher batchila, as they did in the beginning, va'ikots, and I woke up. This was dream number 1. 22, va'eda b'chaleimi, then I saw in a second dream, v'hine sheva shibolim, eiles b'kono echad, there are 7 ears, 7 stalks, 7 ears of grain coming up on one stalk, malayes v'toves, full and good, very healthy looking ones. The same principle. V'hine sheva shibolim, 7 ears, snumes dakesh shnufes, called them withered, thin, blasted with the east wind. Tzimches are sprouting forth, achareim, following the 7 healthy-looking ones. Rashi, tznumes, tzunma b'loshnarami, sela. The word tzunma in Aramaic is a stone. Harein ko'etz b'lilachlach, they were like wood without moisture, bekoshes kesela. They were hard as a rock. V'targume, notzon lakyan, withered, thin. Notzon ein bohem elahanetz. There was only the sprouting, lefishen esrektum in azor, because they had no seed. They were really pathetic looking. 24, vativlana ashibolam adakas, and then the thin ears swallowed up, the 7 healthy good ears, good morning. And I said, to all of my magicians and to all of my dream experts, and nobody had anything meaningful to say to me. They were all hacking a chinik. 25, so Yosef says to Pharaoh, without even thinking, he says, the dream of Pharaoh, these are not 2 dreams, but they're 1 dream. That which God is doing, he tells to Pharaoh. He is told to Pharaoh. God is sharing what's going on, what he's doing, and telling Pharaoh, the king, about it. Sheva pores hatovis, the 7 good, healthy cows. Sheva shonim hema, they refer to 7 years. Sheva shibolim hatovis, and the 7 good ears, Sheva Shonim Hema again, are 7 years. Chaloim Echadu, it's the same 7 good years. The healthy cows and the healthy ears of corn represent 7 good years. He's going to say later, the repetition means to send another message that it's imminent, that it's starting today. Rashi, Sheva Shonim b'Sheva Shonim, don't think that you have 7 good years and then another 7 good years. Kulon Eina Ela Sheva, both 7 goods, the good cows and the good ears of corn, represent one set of 7 good years. Then in that case, why do we need 2 dreams? Because it's ready, it's happening. As he explains to him later, why was the dream repeated in 2 scenarios? Because it's happening now. When it comes to the 7 good years, he says, he tells, he relates to Pharaoh, because it was happening right away. Therefore, he says, higid. That's the expression when you tell somebody something that's happening now. When it comes to the 7 lean years, which are obviously 7 years away, he says, he showed Pharaoh like a video because it was in the distance. Because it was far off. When it's far off, you show. When it's imminent, you tell. It's a little further. Okay, never mind. Verse 26. Did we do 7 to 26? 27. Sheva hapores, and the 7 cows, harakes, the harois, the lean and bad ones, hoilis achareim, that came up after them, Sheva shonim heimar, 7 years. The Sheva shibolim, and the 7 ears, harakes, the empty ones, shedupes hakodim, blasted with the east winds, beaten with the Santana winds, you shall be Sheva Shnei Rov, 7 years of famine. So he's talking about 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. 28, this is exactly, says Yosef, what I said to Pharaoh, Asher Hoalakim Asa, that which God is about to do. Hera Espare, he shows Pharaoh, good morning. Hine, behold, Sheva Shonim boys, 7 years are coming, they're upon us. Sova Godol, great plenty, abundance. Bechol Eretz Mitzrayim, throughout the entire land of Egypt. As I quoted Greenspan yesterday, irrational exuberance. Stock market will go up, real estate will go up, banks will beg you to borrow money and nobody will want to borrow money. Low interest rates, unbelievable. 30, but that will, God forbid, be followed by Sheva Shnei Rov Achareyem, 7 years of famine following them. V'nishkach kol asava be'eretz Mitzrayim. The famine will be so intense that the entire plenty will be forgotten throughout the entire land of Egypt, v'chilo harav esa'oretz, and the famine will consume the land. 30, v'nishkach kol hasova, hu pisrein habliya, that is the explanation of the idea of swallowing up. The Baal HaTurim says on 29, where he uses the word Sheva and Sova, that Sheva and Sova are a similar word. That the plenty will be great. 31. The plenty shall not be known in the land. It'll be forgotten because of that famine that will follow. Because it'll be so severe. Rashi, that's the meaning of you won't recognize that the healthy cows went into the lean cows, that the healthy ears of corn were consumed. The healthy ears of corn were consumed by the lean ones. And here Yosef says, the fact that the dream was repeated twice, because this whole story, the whole thing is ready, it's established, it's prepared by God, and Hashem is hastening to do it. Prepared. 33, Viato, and now Yosef doesn't even take a breath, and he continues to give advice. Let Pharaoh appoint Ish novein v'chochem, an understanding and wise man. Vishisehu, let him appoint him al Eretz Mitzrayim, over the land of Egypt. And economies are. Yaseh Pharaoh, let Pharaoh act. V'yafket pkidim, let him appoint officers, overseers, al ha'oretz, over the entire land. V'chimesh, Rashi says the word v'chimesh comes from the word, let him arm, let him ready, as Eretz Mitzrayim, the land of Egypt, the Sheva Shnei Hasava, during the 7 years of plenty. Because the way you can adequately and properly prepare for the famine is by spending time, appropriately putting away the food from the years of plenty, so that there will be proper budgeting to be able to distribute it during the years of famine. Rashi 34, V'chimesh kitargum be'zorzun. They shall hasten, v'chein v'chamushim, prepare, ready, arm. What should be done? Says Yosef, Yikbitzu, let these officers gather as kol oichel, all the food. Hashana Matevis of the good years, Habois Oila of the coming good years, so that the government gather the food. Yitzbiru bor, and let them store it properly. We see later that everybody put food away. However, everybody's food rotted, was attacked by mice. It was only the government food that had enough preservatives in it. Red dye number 3. That lasted into the lean years. In fact, by the way, as we will learn, in fact, there were not 7 lean years. Instead of 7 years, there were some 2 lean years. And the years of famine came to an end early in honor and in merit of Jacob and his family's arrival to Egypt. So in fact, there were only 2 tough years. But in any event, the food that everyone prepared rotted. It was only the government food under Yosef's direction which survived. Yitzberu, let them prepare stored food. Tachas yad pari, under government supervision. Eichel, food be'orim, in the various cities. Vishamoru, and let them preserve it properly. Yosef had the secrets of proper preservation. 35, Eskol Eichel, Shem Dover, now, the Fikach Tamei Ba'alef, therefore, its accent is on the Aleph. It's not Ochel, but it's Ochel. V'noked b'patach koton, and it has the vocalization it has, Ochel Shupo, but Ochel, which is a verb, Kigain Kol Eichel, Chelav, Tamei Lamata B'chav, the accent is on the Chav, V'noked Komatz Koton, it's not Ochel, it's Ochel. Tachas Yad Pare, B'shusei, under his rule, Ubeitz Reisav, and in his storehouses. 36, V'hoya ha'eichel, let this food be, L'fikodin la'oretz, as a store, as a future insurance for the land, l'sheva, put away for the 7. Shnei harav, years of famine, asher tiyana, which will come, the eretz time to the land of Egypt. V'loisi kares ha'oretz berov, so that the land not perish during the years of the famine. V'hoya ha'eichel, 36 Rashi, hatzobor, or that which is stored. Kishar pikodin, like any other deposit. Hagonos l'kiyam ha'oretz, which is hidden for the welfare of the land. So let them put this food away under the supervision of the Federal Reserve. 37, this sounded good. Vayitab hadover, and this whole thing was pleasing, in the eyes of Pharaoh, in the eyes of all of his servants. It just sounded right. 38, so Pharaoh says to his servants, this fellow here is suggesting an economic czar. Do you think we could possibly find a guy like this? Ish, a man, in whom the Spirit of God is within him. Maybe we should consider this Yosef fellow as our economic czar. What do you think? Question is he available? Does he have any important commitments? What's he doing these days? Will his board of directors let him go? 38, can we find a guy like this? Even if we go and find him, can we find someone? Interrogative, question mark, whenever there's a hey at the beginning of the word, and it has a sound, it means can we possibly find. End of today's Torah portion. Good morning. The third portion of Miketz, Tuesday's portion, chapter 41, verse 39. We read in yesterday's portion that after Pharaoh related his dreams to Yosef, Yosef dazzled Pharaoh with his interpretation. And when Yosef said, you have to appoint a czar to be sure to store enough food during the years of plenty for the years of famine, Pharaoh said, can there be anyone as wise as this gentleman? And now we read in 39, Vayomer Paro, and Pharaoh said El Yosef to Yosef, Achrei heidia elikim eischa es kol zeis, after God informed you of all of this, where you were able to predict 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine, and that it's upon us, and it's happening now. Ein novein b'chocham kamoich. I have concluded that with regard to the appointment of an economy czar, there is surely no one as understanding and as wise as you. The word novon comes from the word bina, and the word chacham, of course, is chachma. There's no one as understanding and as wise as you. 39 Rashi, ein novein v'chacham kamoicha lebakesh ish novein v'chacham shamarta, for us to go look for a man understanding and wise as you suggested. What are we going to do? We're going to put an ad in the Wall Street Journal? I mean, who are we going to get already? There's no one as wise as you. There is no one like you, and therefore I am about to draft you to do the job. Pharaoh goes on to say in 40, you then will be in charge over my house, and Pharaoh's house is Egypt. And by your word, Yishak kol ami, all my people will be fed, will be taken care of. Rak hakise egdal mimeka, only by the throne will I be greater than you. I will be the king, you will do all the work, and I will get all the credit. That's what kings do. Yishak, Rashi, Yitzan, Yisparnes, fed, sustained, Kol tzorchei ami, all the needs of my people. Yunasim will be provided, al yotcha, through you. Kemei nashkuvar, Garnisan in Old French. I will be called king, but you will rule. Kisei, Lashon Shalom Alucha. Throne means the royal title. Vigadel as Kisei mikisei adeni hamelach. So it means throne. 41. Vayomer Paro el Yosef. Once again, Pharaoh says to Yosef, Re'ei nasati escha. Behold, I have placed you, appointed you, all over Kol Eretz Mitzrayim, the entire land of Egypt. Rashi, Nasati escha manesi Yosach. In Targum, I have appointed you. The Afal became Lashon Asina, who rooted in the word given, to make you on high, to place you, to appoint you. Bein l'gdula, bein l'shiflos. The word can be used for greatness or degradation. 42. Vayosar Parias Tabate. Pharaoh removed his special governing signet ring, Meyal Yodeh, from his hand. We have a similar expression where Achashverosh removes his signet ring in the Purim story and gives it to Haman and says, do what you want to the Jews. So that is the idea of, that is the ring with which he signed all documents and all edicts. So he gives this signet ring, Al Yad Yosef, into Yosef's hands. He says, knock yourself out. You can decree whatever you want to. And he clothed him. He arrayed him in bigdei sheish, in garments of linen, royal garments. And he placed Revid Hazav, a gold chain, al tzavarav, upon his neck, and he was looking really cool. 42. When you take the king's signet ring and you give it, he asks it's a sign to the one who he gives it to be second in command. Bigdei sheish, dvar chshivus hu b'Mitzrayim. Garments of linen were very choshev, they were very distinct in Egypt, and that's a mark of distinction. Revid, anok, a chain, because it's joined together. Like a rope chain, called a revid, it's called a revid. V'chein marvadim, ravadati, arsi, ratzafti, arsi, mertzofes, patchwork, mishnah mukaf revdim, shel evan, al harevid, shebazor, on the pavement of the temple courtyard. V'ritzpa, that's called the floor of pavement. So that's the expression of the word revid. 43, vayarke veisei, and he caused him to ride, b'merkebes hamishna, in the second chariot, I guess Air Force 2. Asher lei, which he had, vayikru lefonav, and they proclaimed before him, Abrech. Abrech in Ebenese would be, you be the man. That's what Abrech is. You are the man. V'nosein eisei, and he appointed him, al kol eretz Mitzrayim, over the entire land of Egypt. So Yosef is now the ruler over Egypt. He's the man. 43, b'mirkebes ha-mishnah, hashniya lemerkavtei, the second to his Pharaoh's chariot, ha-mahaleches eitzel shalei, the one that goes next to him, avrech kitargume dein abba lemalka. He is the father, he is the counselor, he's the advisor of the king. Father means wise man. He's the king's wise man. Reich b'lshoin arami melech, in Aramaic, reich means king. As we find in Baba Basra, the usage, lo reicha v'lo bar reicha, he's neither a king nor the son of a king. This is the story with Hurdis, Uvidivri Agoda Dorish Rabbi Yehuda, Abrech Ze Yosef, in the Medrash. Rabbi Yehuda says, Abrech refers to Yosef, Shu Ab B'chochma, because he's a father when it comes to wisdom, Verach Bashonim, but he's young in years. Yosef was a total of 30 years old at this time. Omar le Rabbi Yesi ben Durmaskis. Rabbi Yesi ben Durmaskis says, Ad Mosayat Ma'abas Aleinu Es Haksuvim. This is a poetic expression of disagreement. How long will you pervert the meanings of these verses? Abrech is not Ab and Rach, but Ein Abrech El Loshen Birkayim. It means knees, that everybody who walks in bends their knees. But Nosan Esa, he was appointed, so they pay tribute to him. They treat him like a king. Okay, let me just take a look here. Okay. 44. Pharaoh said to Yosef, Ani Pharaoh, I am Pharaoh. But without you, a poetic expression, no man will have permission to lift his hand or foot in the entire land of Egypt. You are the absolute monarch. You are the ruler. This is Egypt did not believe in the rule of law. They believed in the rule of kings. And Yosef made the rules. Ani Fari, I have the power to make decrees over my kingdom. So I am decreeing that no man shall lift his hand without you, without your permission. Another meaning, Ani Pari, I am Pharaoh. Ani Melech, I will be king. But without you, no one will be able to do anything. You make the decrees. I will only be greater than you with the throne. As the Targum says, no man shall raise his hand to gird a sword or his foot to ride on a horse. Everybody who does anything in Egypt needed a permit. They needed permission, and Yosef is going to issue permission. Now, Pharaoh said, what kind of name is Yosef for a king? What are they going to call him? Yosala. So Pharaoh says, we got to rename him. Give him something choshev, something prominent. 45, Vayikra Pharaoh. So Pharaoh renamed, called Shem Yosef, the name of Yosef. He called him Tzofnas Paneach. Tzofnas Paneach. As Rashi explains, the one who explains the hidden things, because the dream was hidden, and Yosef revealed the hidden things. Tzofnas Paneach means the revealer of the hidden. And he gave him, Pharaoh was also a shatchen. He was a matchmaker. Pharaoh gave him as Osnas, a young lady by the name of Osnas, Bas Potiphera, daughter of Potiphera, Kohen On, who was the priest of On, Leisha as a wife. So now Yosef not only has a new name, he has a new wife. Mikeitz Yosef al Eretz Mitzrayim, and Yosef went forth over the land of Egypt, and he was going to check out his new country. Going to have a good time. 45, Tzofnas Paneach. What does that mean? Mefaresh Hatzvunes, explaining hidden things. And Rashi tells us, Ve'ein lepaneach dimyan b'mikra. The word paneach has no other similar word throughout the entire Tanakh. There's no sister usage of that word. Rashi brings down from Gemara Seita. The Gemara Seita, page 13, is the source where the Gemara, the Talmud, interprets the whole Yosef story extensively. And so Rashi tells us, Potiphera, who Potiphar, that Potiphera is the same Potiphar who was his ex-owner, who accused him of intending to rape his wife, threw him into prison. Yosef languished in prison for 10 or 12 years. He now marries Potiphar's daughter, Osnas. Nikra Potiphera, why is he called Potiphera? Which sounds feminine gender. So the Gemara says, Al Shen Historis Me'elav, because after the story of what occurred with Yosef, he emasculated himself. He castrated himself out of frustration. Why? Because he was interested in Yosef for his own intimacy purposes. He desired Yosef. This lifestyle was very common in Egypt at the time. So he wanted Yosef for himself, lemishkav zochar, for a relationship. And when he found out what happened, that Yosef went to rape his wife, he couldn't handle the frustration, and that's why they call him now Potiphera. That's what Rashi brings down from the Gemara in Sota. There's, of course, the Medrash that says it doesn't sound like Yosef to go and marry an Egyptian girl. What's going on here? How does that work? So there's a famous Medrash that when Dinah was raped by Shechem, she conceived. She became pregnant. She was impregnated. And she had a daughter. And that daughter was sent off to be raised in Potiphar's house, so that Osnas is in fact Potiphar's adopted daughter, really Dinah's daughter. And the whole Medrash says that Yosef found she was wearing a locket, and the locket says, I am Dinah's daughter. So that explains how on the one hand she's the daughter of Potiphar and Potiphera, on the other hand she's also Yosef's Jewish niece. That's a Medrash. Let's look at Baal HaTurim for a second on verse 45. The Baal HaTurim tells us, gives us some meaning, some additional meaning in Tzofnas Paneach. The Baal HaTurim says that it's used as an acrostic. Tzofnas, Tzadik, Pei, Nun, Tov, stands for Tzadik, this righteous person. Pitpat, he sort of spat. Nefesh, Tava, at his soul which lusted, which means Yosef was able to withstand the temptation. Ina, nafsho, Potiphar, Ina, nafsho, chinam. The Torah testifies here that Potiphar afflicted and tormented Yosef's soul without reason, that Yosef was innocent. So that is what the Baal HaTurim tells us, the letters making up the words. Tzofnas paneach mean, tzadik pitpat nefesh tava, Potiphar, ina nafshei chinam. That Yosef controlled himself and Potiphar tormented him by imprisoning him for no reason. Davar achar, a second meaning. Tzofnas paneach, tzofe, that Yosef was a seer. Poda, he was a redeemer. Novi, he was a prophet. Tomach, he was a supporter. Poser, he was an interpreter. Onav, he was humble. Novi, again, he was prophetic. Chose, he was a seer. This is the Baal HaTurim on verse 45. Verse 46, the Torah now tells us, how old was Yosef during this whole event? Yosef ben Shloshim Shana. This is a very important verse, because this is one of those verses that is a chronological factor in the Torah, which helps us determine the chronology of Torah. It's a marker. Yosef is 30 years old, when he stood before Pharaoh, Melech Mitzrayim, king of Egypt. So let's just look back a second. The last marker we had is that Yosef was 17. Yosef ben Shvayas Rishona, Hayaraya Estzain, Hayaraya Es Echad Batzain. Yosef was 17 when he was sold into slavery. According to the oral law, the whole story of being sold and taken down to Egypt and working in Potiphar's house lasted the better part of a year. So he's now 18. 18, he is accused of rape and arrested and put into prison for 10 years, so he's now 28. When he was 27, the butler and the baker have dreams. The butler and the baker are incarcerated, rather, and at 28 they have the dreams. Yosef successfully interprets their dreams, says, remember me to Pharaoh. 2 more years passed. Pharaoh had a dream, so Yosef is now 30. That is how the numbers work, where we're told that Yosef spent 10 plus 2 years in prison. The oral law tells us that, but we see in the written law that the numbers work out. And Yosef went forth from the presence of Pharaoh, and went about Bechol Eretz Mitzrayim, throughout the entire land of Egypt. He took one of them tour buses just to see what Egypt is all about, because before that he had seen Potiphar's house, and he had an extensive knowledge of the prison. Other than that, he hadn't seen too many zip codes. So now Yosef went about to see Egypt. Now the Torah begins to tell us about the abundance of the years of plenty. And the land produced during the 7 years of plenty. So from the time Yosef was 30 until the time Yosef was 37, these were historically abundant years in Egypt. Fantastic. Egypt produced endless amounts of produce. Likmotzim in heaps and piles. Nobody knew what to do with it. There was so much. As the Targum says, the inhabitants of the land gathered. It means to gather what the earth brought forth. They made piles and heaps and they gathered. The kmotzim, kaimitz al kaimitz, handful on top of handful, yod al yod, hand by hand, all your eitzim, they stored the food. It was just so much abundance, so much plenty. 48 by Yikbet says, Kol Echel Sheba Shonim, they gathered all of the food of the 7 years, Asher Hoyu, which was Be'eretz Mitzrayim, the land of Egypt. I mean, in addition, of course, to what they consumed. There was so much they had enough to store. By Yiten Echel Ba'orim, they stored food in the various cities. Echels de Ha'ir, the food of the fields of that city, Asher Svivesa, that were in the farms around it. Nosan B'Secher, they placed it in storage houses and storage places in the cities, so that every city had their own storage houses. Each type of earth preserves its own fruits, therefore its own produce. So Yosef advised that they put within the produce of the earth, the soil of that place, because the big question was, how do you preserve all this produce? How do you ensure that it doesn't rot and it doesn't get consumed by rats? This is the big challenge, how to effectively preserve this. Now, as we're about to learn, the Egyptians, everybody stored their own food in their basements, in their garages, but everybody's food rotted. The only food which survived was the government-supervised food, which Yosef organized, because Yosef was brilliant in preservation of food. This is one of the tricks Yosef used, is he would pack soil into the food, local soil, and that would ensure that this food would be responsibly and properly preserved. The Rebbe gave a talk about this very verse, this subject, about the idea of preserving produce with the soil. And the Rebbe explained symbolically, we say in the beautiful prayer at the end of the Amidah, Elokai Netzer, V'nafshi la'ofar la'kel tiya. May my soul be like earth to all. That is a prayer to God that we be humble. It's an expression of humility. So the Rebbe explained that there's a lesson from this verse with regard to nafshi ke'ofar la'kel tiya, to humility. That humility also has to be consistent with one's talents. For example, if someone is scholarly, he can't be humble when it comes to how much money he has. He says, I don't have any money, because he doesn't. And then be arrogant with regard to scholarship. Or if someone's wealthy, he can't be arrogant with regard to his wealth and humble with regard to his knowledge. That's not humility. Humility is according to the soil of the local produce, that the humility has to be consistent with the talent. That a scholar has to be humble about his scholarship. How is a scholar humble about his scholarship? How is a wealthy person humble about his wealth? He says, it's not me, it's God's blessing, which enabled me to work towards this, to know that the blessing comes from God. What does that have to do with humility? By saying that if somebody else had my gifts, he might do better. So that's the gist of the idea of the soil being placed locally with the produce. Verse 49, Vayitzber Yosef bor, and Yosef collected grain, produce, kechel hayom, as plentiful as the sand which is on the sea. Harbe me'ed, mucho, a whole lot. Kichodel isper, first they used to take tally and keep counts, but then they stopped counting. Ki ein misper, it was too much to count. Rashi, until those who are in charge of counting stopped counting. This is an abbreviated verse. Ki ein misper, the fish ein misper, they didn't have high enough numbers. Because. Now the Torah tells us in Yosef's personal life, Yosef and his wife, Osnas, also had a couple of kids. Yosef, Yulach Shnei Bonim. To Yosef, there were born 2 sons. B'terem Tovesh Nasaro, before the years of famine came about. Asher Yodele, born to him by his wife Osnas, Bas Potiphera, daughter of Potiphera, Kohen On, the VIP, the priest of On. B'terem tovesh nasara, a very, very famous verse discussed extensively in the Talmud tractate Tanis, which talks about fasting. What does the Torah tell us? What contribution does the Torah make by telling us that Joseph's two sons were born before the famine? Mikan, from here we learn, says the Gemara, that during a severe famine, intimacy is forbidden. That a person is forbidden from being intimate with his wife during years of famine because the whole world is suffering, and that is part of the suffering process of famine, and this is the biblical source. Therefore, the Torah tells us, yes, Joseph had two children, but the children were conceived and born before the famine. And this is discussed extensively in that tractate which deals with fasts. 51, Vayikra Yosef Hashem Abacher, Joseph called the name of the older one Menashe. Ki, because Nashani Elokim es kol amoli ves kol beis avi. God has helped me forget all my toil and all my father's house. In other words, Menashe means forget. In order to survive, Joseph had to forget a little bit. He had to make peace with the fact that he's all alone in a strange country. And that is the name of Menashe, is I'm able to acclimate myself to this new land, and I'm able to survive, and I'm not totally devastated and depressed because of my loss. So that's the idea of Menashe. In a more forward sense, the idea of Menashe, of Joseph's two sons, Menashe and Ephraim. Menashe was the one who got into politics. Menashe was the one who helped his father in the palace, because Menashe is the one who absorbed Egyptian culture. He became very involved in running the government. He was the official interpreter, but still held on to his Jewishness. So Menashe is the Jew who functions in the country in which he lives, and he rises to the top while still maintaining his Yiddishkeit. That's the idea of Menashe. What's the idea of Ephraim? Shem Hasheni, and the name of the second son, Korah, he called Ephraim, and Ephraim means be fruitful and multiply, and Ephraim was the Torah scholar. After Yaakov came to Egypt, Ephraim would visit with Yaakov every day and study with him. Ki Ephrani Elokim beretz onyi. The name Ephraim says that not only was I able to forget the sadness of leaving my father's house, but I was able to prosper here in Egypt. Not only prosper, as is the simple interpretation, but the deeper interpretation, prosper in Yiddishkeit as well, because the most famous name that Yosef is known by is Yosef HaTzadik, that even as the king and viceroy of Egypt, Yosef maintained absolute 100% righteousness, as did his children, and therefore he's saying Menashe is I was able to adjust. Ephraim means I still am growing my spirituality even here in Egypt. And of course the story continues with tomorrow's portion. Good morning. Chapter 41, verse 53 in the portion of Miketz, Wednesday's portion. Joseph becomes king in Egypt. The 7 years of plenty pass by, and Joseph is named the Time Magazine Man of the Year. And now we continue to verse 53. Vatichleno sheva shnei hasava. The 7 years of plenty come to an end. Asher hoya be'eretz Mitzrayim, which were in the land of Egypt. And remember, we learned about the fact that under Joseph's supervision, food was stored away and preserved. Vatchilena, there now began, Sheba Shnei Harab, the 7 years of famine. Lovei began to come, Kasher, exactly as Omar Yosef predicted. Vayhirov, and there was famine, hunger, Bechol ha'arotzes, in all of the countries, in all of the lands around Egypt, that whole region. Ubechol Eretz Mitzrayim, Hoya Lochem, but there was plenty of bread, plenty of food in the entire land of Egypt, and that was ironic. The whole area is in deep famine, and Egypt, the economy is booming. Okay, let's see where we are with Balaturim here. Okay, next verse. 55, Vatirav Kol Eretz Mitzrayim. As time went on, the entire land of Egypt became famished. Why? We just learned that there was plenty. Because all of their private stores rotted. Whatever the people, the individual citizens put away, it all spoiled and rotted and was overcome by rodents. By Yitzhak ha'om, so the people began to cry out, El Paro, to Pharaoh, La lochem, for bread. They said, we want bread. Vayemer Parei l'chol Mitzrayim, so Pharaoh says to the entire Egypt, don't bother me. I appointed someone. Remember? L'chu El Yosef, go to Yosef. Asher yemar lochem tasu. Whatever he tells you to do, you should do. And Rashi is going to tell us why they didn't want to go to Yosef. Because Yosef told them to do something that they weren't interested in doing. 55, Atirav kol eretz Mitzrayim, the entire land of Egypt became famished. What happened? Shehirkiva tuasam, their grain rotted. She'otzru, the grain which they stored. It all rotted. Chutz, with the exception of any food stored under government Yosef's supervision. Chutz mishel Yosef, except the government storage, that was fresh and good and wonderful. So no one had food except for the government. They had to consider a government option. Asher yemer lachem tasu, whatever he will tell you, that's what you should do. Why were they so upset? What was he telling them? You can't even imagine what he was telling them. He told them to dial 1-800-MOEL and to get a bris. They said, a what? Because Yosef would tell them, you want food? I'll give you a food card, but you need to have a bris. They said, what's a bris? They should be circumcised. Yosef told the Egyptians, go and have a circumcision. They were not very happy campers. When they came to Pharaoh and they said, this guy Yosef is crazy. You know what he's telling us? Omar Lohem, Pharaoh said to them, I understand why you're hesitant in undergoing circumcision, but why didn't you collect your own grain? You wouldn't need him. It's not like you didn't know there was a famine coming. He announced it to you, didn't he? He told you that the famine years are coming. They said, you don't understand, Pharaoh, your majesty. We collected a lot of grain, but it rotted. So Pharaoh says, no, what do you want from me? He said, in that case, if I were you, I would do everything he tells you to do. Because look, he decreed that your grain should rot. Perhaps he'll decree that we should rot. So therefore, if I were you, my advice to you is, you do exactly what he says. The Balaturim says, lochem tasu has the numerical value, the words lochem tasu has the numerical value of hamilo tasu. You should do the circumcision. That he commanded them to circumcise themselves. Pause for a moment. The question is asked by all the commentaries. Circumcision is not one of the 7 Noahide laws. Yosef is a scholar. Why is Yosef telling Egyptians to undergo circumcision? It's a good question. And there are a whole bunch of answers. Just very quickly, a few of them. In the simplest sense, Yosef was made the czar, so to speak, over Egypt. In a sense, Pharaoh said to him, Yosef, you own Egypt. Everyone are your servants. The halacha is that when a Jew has a slave, his slave has to be circumcised. So if the Egyptians are slaves to Yosef, by halacha they have to undergo circumcision. That's the simple halachic response. In a broader sense, the more spiritual response is the Egyptians were the most perverted, lewd, decadent people. And circumcision, the philosophers write, tames and limits the drive of a man. So therefore, Yosef intended to calm them down a little bit so that their hot blood should chill a little bit. And that could be accomplished through circumcision. Another reason. Yosef knew that ultimately his brothers would come to Egypt. And ultimately they would join the gym. And ultimately they would be embarrassed. So he wanted everybody in the gym to look like his brothers. So that's why he wanted everyone to undergo circumcision. Another meaning is he knew that as soon as he would command all the Egyptians to circumcise themselves, it would hit all the news websites. Michigan, the viceroy, commands circumcision. And hopefully his brothers and father would hear about it, and they would come because they would suspect that it has something to do with Yosef. These are some of the many explanations which are given in response to the very good question, why does Yosef command the Egyptians to circumcise themselves? Whatever answer you accept, the fact is he commanded them to circumcise themselves, and they were not very happy campers. But as they got hungrier, they called them oil. Verse 56, V'harav hoya al kol pnei ha'oretz. And the famine spread throughout the entire land. Yosef began to systemize things. Vayiftach Yosef, Yosef opened Eskol Asher Bohem, all of the storehouses. Vayishber leMitzrayim, and he sold grain, he sold food to the Egyptians. Vayechaz Akarov, and the famine became more and more powerful. Be'eretz Mitzrayim, in the land of Egypt. Al kol pnei ha'oretz, upon the face of the earth. Who are the face? Who are the face of the nation? Mihem pnei ha'oretz, elu ha'ashirim. Even the wealthy people ran out of food. As kol asher bohem ketargum edivahem ibura, in which there was grain. Yishber leMitzrayim sheber loshin mecher, selling, veloshin kinyan, who purchasing. So Yosef opened up checkout stands in all of the government storehouses, and he sold grain, and people would come, and they would have to pay the going rate for grain according to the supply and demand of grain, and as it got more and more rare, the price went up. Kan mishamish loshin mecher, the word here is used to describe selling, and buying. That's only used in reference to grain. That word is also used buying and selling with wine and milk. 57, V'chol ha'oretz bo Mitzrayim. All of the surrounding countries came down to Egypt, Lishber, to purchase El Yosef and Yosef's warehouses, Ki chozak harav b'chol ha'oretz, because the famine became very strong and powerful throughout all of the lands. Everyone had to come to Egypt. Chapter 42. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Vayar Yaakov saw Ki yesh shever b'Mitzrayim, that there was food, grain in Egypt. So Yaakov said to his sons, Lo ma tisro, why should you stare upon each other? Go to Egypt and purchase some grain. Rashi, Vayar Yaakov ki yesh shever b'Mitzrayim, umehechon ro. What does it mean? Yaakov saw. Where did he see? Did he have a television? Was he watching the news? Where did he see? V'halei ro, he didn't see. Elashama, he heard. So why doesn't it say Vayishma Yaakov? Yaakov heard. Shenemar, as it says, the next verse, Hine shamati, behold, I heard. So why does it say he saw? Umahu vayar, what did he see? So therefore, Rashi says we have to accept the Midrashic interpretation in the Gemara. Ra, he saw be'ispaklaria shel kodesh, through his holy looking glass of prophecy. He prophetically saw Sha'adayin yesh lo shever b'Mitzrayim, that he personally has hope in Egypt. What was his personal issue? He was in an intense mourning state for Yosef. He saw that there was a light at the end of the tunnel for him in Egypt, but he didn't see clearly prophetic vision, which informed him specifically, Yosef, that it's Yosef, but he knew that good stuff awaits him in Egypt. Lama tisro, why do you look upon one another? Lama taru atzmechem b'fnei b'nei Yishmael or b'nei Esav kilo atam sveim. Rashi interprets this, why should you look satiated? Why should you look like you have no problems? Here we are rapidly running out of food, and you're smiling at one another and saying, Akol b'seder gamur. Why should you look as if there's no problem? And when your Ishmaelite cousins and Esavite cousins ask you, so how you guys doing with the food situation? Say, no problem, never better. Don't do that. The Gemara teaches us that at that time they still had grain, but they were rapidly running low. And I, says Rashi, believe in the simple meaning. Why should everyone gaze at you and wonder that you're not searching for food before you run out? I heard from others, leanness. Why should you become lean through famine? He makes lean, make himself lean, and so on. But in any event, what he's saying is that you got to deal with the reality. The reality is we are running out of food. Very quickly, there's a beautiful story about the Alter Rebbe, founder of Chabad, Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi, that when he was arrested, before he was taken into Tsarist prison, he sent emissaries here and there. He sent one emissary to his mechutin, the famous Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev. And he asked that the Barditchever pray for him. The emissary comes to the Barditchever and says, it's a terrible thing that happened. The Alter Rebbe was arrested. Pray for him. So the Barditchever says, what's his name? I need his name and his mother's name. So the guy says, I'll tell you the truth. I was in such a panic that I didn't check. I mean, his name is Shneir Zalman, but we don't know his mother's name. So the Barditchever said, no problem. And he randomly opened up a chumash, and the chumash opened up to our verse. The verse says, Vayar Yaakov saw, Ki yesh shever b'Mitzrayim, that there is hope for him, for his dilemma in Egypt, that there is salvation for him in Egypt. Says the Barditchever, shever, hope, keep hope alive. Shever stands for Shneir ben Rivka, no problem. And the Barditchever was able to pray for the Alter Rebbe. So that's the idea of dilemma, hope, and so on. Shever, in that case, it's a very beautiful story. Okay, verse 6. Vayomer, he said, Yaakov says to his brother, to his sons rather, Hine shamati, I heard it in the grapevine. Ki yesh shever b'Mitzrayim, that there is hope in Egypt, or there is food in Egypt. Redu shama, go down there. V'shivru lonu misham, and purchase for us from there. V'nichya, so that we may live, v'lo nomos, and not die. Redu shama, why does he use the word redu and not lechu? The normal way of speaking would be lechu shama, go down. Redu has a numerical value of 210. Ramaz, this is an allusion to the 210 years, which the Jewish people were enslaved to Egypt. Kiminyan redu, corresponding to the numerical value of the word redu. Parenthetically, they weren't really enslaved for 210 years, but they remained there for 210 years, and ultimately to be severely enslaved. And that is the message of the usage of the word redu. Verse 3, so the brothers of Yosef descended down upon Egypt, all 10 of them, to purchase grain from Egypt. It doesn't say sons of Yaakov. Melamed, this teaches us that by this time, they had regretted his sale. And they set their hearts, that if they find him, they would conduct themselves with him, as true brothers should. They imagined that he was some slave somewhere. to redeem him, b'chol moment, sheep's karleim, with all, for all the money in the world. Nothing would hold him back. Asora, why does it say 10? It says that Binyamin was not sent. Anybody who knows mathematics knows that there were 10. Because Yosef and Binyamin are 11, 12. When it comes to brotherhood, they were divided into 10. To begin with, the hatred was never the same years ago, and now the love was not the same. There were various degrees and gradations. When it came to buy food, they all had one mission. We are here to buy food, and here they were all equal pasqual. Verse 4, V'yez Binyamin, Achi Yosef, and Binyamin, Yosef's full brother, Le'sholach Yaakov, Yaakov did not send Echad with his brothers, Kiyomar, because he said, he was concerned, Pen Yikro'enu Osein, lest an accident happened to him. He says, I don't trust these guys. They're very accident prone. They came back without Yosef. I'm afraid they'll come back without Binyamin and tell me some Baba Maisa. So I'd rather keep Binyamin at home. Very famous Rashi from the Medrash. Pen Yikro'enu Osein. Yaakov was a Jew who believed in divine providence. If something has to happen to Binyamin, it could happen at home too. Nothing's going to happen to him at home. Statistics say most people who die at home. That was a joke. Amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, Mikan, from here we learn, Sha'asoton mekatreg b'sha'as asakona. That the Soton brings charges against a person when he's in danger. What this means is as follows. Yes, it's true that there is a bashert, there is a decree as to what should happen and what should not happen to a person. But that is under normal circumstances. But when a person finds himself in a situation of danger, then he needs to be saved from danger. Here, the question is this person worth a miracle? So he has a new court case. And then the Sultan comes and says, no. But if a person does not endanger himself, he doesn't need a miracle. So life can go on in a normal fashion. And that is why we're told that it's our responsibility to conduct ourselves in a safe manner, not to endanger, not to walk into the middle of traffic, not to go skydiving. You know, if it once you don't succeed, skydiving is not for you. That was also a joke. So we have to be very careful what we do, because then Hashem has to make a miracle to save us. And Yaakov says, travel to Egypt is dangerous. I don't need to jeopardize Binyamin's safety. A lot more to be said, but not in this setting. Verse 5, Vayaveyu b'nei Yisrael, and the children of Israel, the sons of Israel, Yaakov's sons came, Lishber, to purchase, amongst all the customers. There were tons of customers. There was lots of pushing and shoving, lots of lines. Because the famine was severe in the land of Canaan. Good morning, so they came to purchase. What does it mean they came amongst the customers? They tried to hide amongst the customers. They concealed themselves. They didn't want to stick out. These were 10 different-looking, good-looking, big, starker guys. So they decided that they should all take different entrances so that they mingle and get lost in the crowd. They should not be recognized. Because Yaakov said to them, don't make yourself an item. Their father commanded them, they should all not go into one entrance. They should spread out to different entrances. You know, there was an entrance, there was security. So they went to the different security booths. They had to put down their laptops. Each one of the brothers should enter through a different gate. He says, I don't want you to stick out. Who knows? They'll give you an ayin hora, an evil eye. Shekulam noim, because Yaakov's sons, every one of them were gorgeous. They were all strong. But, as the Medrashim say, every night, Yosef looked at the list of every gateway, and when he saw in one gate, Reuben ben Yaakov, and another gate, Shimon ben Yaakov, and another gate, Levi ben Yaakov, he said, guess what? They're here. Because Yosef was looking for them. Verse 6, now the Torah tells us, you should know that, the Yosef who hashalit al ha'oretz, that Yosef was the ruler of the land, who hamashbir, he was the one that sold, was in charge of providing food, l'chol am ha'oretz, for all the people of the land. Vayaveyu achei Yosef, and Yosef's brothers came, vayishtachavu lo, and bowed down to him, apayim, with their faces, orza, to the earth. Rashi, vayishtachavu lo apayim, nishtatchu lo apneim. They fell on their faces. They came totally down. The meaning of the word hashtachavo in the Bible is pishut yodayim v'raglayim, who extending the hands and feet totally to the ground. That is a sign of subservience, and they bowed to Yosef. The Baal HaTurim says, vayishtachavu lo, these two words have the numerical value. Bekan niskaya machalom, here the dream is fulfilled, or as the comments to the Baal HaTurim says, here the dream begins to be fulfilled, because the dream was about 11 stars, and here there are 10 brothers bowing down to him. Just to pause for a moment and to point out that verse 6 is a very important verse in the teachings of Kabbalah. What does verse 6 say? The Yosef hu hashalit, Yosef is the ruler, al ha'oretz, over the land, hu hamashbir, he is the one that sustains, that gives food, l'chol am ha'oretz, to all of the people of the land. Yosef is known as Yosef HaTzadik, Yosef the Tzaddik. Tzaddik Yesod Olam. The Tzaddik is the foundation of the entire world. The entire world rests on the Tzaddik. Says the verse, and Kabbalah explains this to mean that Yosef, the Tzaddik, the one special Tzaddik, the Tzaddik Hador of every generation, who Hashalit, he is the one who is the spiritual ruler of the generation. Al Ha'oretz, over the entire earth. And who? It is this Tzaddik in his merit, Hamashbir, who provides sustenance, l'chol am ha'oretz, to all the people. So that the Tzaddik Hador, the righteous person of that generation, provides material blessing to the entire generation. And that is all alluded to in chapter 42, verse 6, about Yosef HaTzadik, the Tzaddik Yesod Olam, that if we want economic blessing, the economic blessing comes from the Tzaddik. After that, it goes through the various people standing at the cash registers. It goes through our businesses. But the bracha comes from the Tzaddik. That's a Kabbalistic teaching on verse 6. Verse 7, Vayar Yosef es Echav, Yosef saw his brothers, Vayakirem, and he recognized them, Vayisnaker aleim, but he acted like a stranger to them. Vaydaber itom, and he spoke with them, kosher, tough talk. Vayemer aleim, and he said to them, Me'ayin bosem, where do you come from? Where are you from? Vayemer, and they said, Me'eretz Canaan, we come from the land of Canaan, and we're here, Lish Bereichel, to buy food. Rashi 7, Vayisnaker aleim, Nasalohem kinachri badvorim, he made himself like a stranger to them with words, Ledaber, kosher, to speak tough. The commentaries point out that Yosef wanted to hug and kiss them and thank them for selling him. And Yosef wanted to tell them how good everything is. But along came the same Gabriel who met Yosef on the ways and told him on the way when he was 17 and told him where his brothers are. We learned it was the angel Gabriel. The angel Gabriel came along and forced Yosef to act as a stranger because the name of the game was to set up this whole net here. So Vayisnaker aleim grammatically means he was caused by some other power, by the angel Gabriel, to act as a stranger. Verse 8, Yosef recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. A very famous verse. 8, Yosef, in the simple sense, because when he left them, they were all mature, they were all fully bearded, and they looked more or less the same. 22 years later, they didn't recognize him because when he left them, he was 17, he was a young kid. He was without a beard, and now he is grown, full grown, with a full beard, and so on. Medrash Haggadah, the Medrash says that this talks more about their attitude. Yosef recognized his brothers. When they were handed over to his authority, he recognized that they are his brothers, and had compassion upon them. But they, did not recognize him when he fell into their hands, to conduct themselves with him in a brotherly way. And again, this is a famous verse when we say that people do not reciprocate the kindness that is shown to them. The explanation with the angel Gabriel comes from the Balaturim here. Verse 8, verse 9, Vayizker Yosef, and Yosef recalled, Esachalem is the dreams, Ashachalam Lahem, which he dreamed to them some 22 years earlier. Vayemer Aleichem, and he said to them, Meraglam atem, y'all are spies. Lireis, you came to see, as Ervas Ha'oretz, the vulnerability of the land, Bosem, that's why you came. 9, Asher Cholam Lohem, Aleichem, about them, V'yoda, and he knew, Sheniskaimu, that they're beginning to be fulfilled, Sharei Shtachavulekos, already they're bowing to him. Ervas Ha'oretz, Gili, the exposed parts of the land, Ha'oretz, Mechani Nechel, the coverage from where it can be conquered, Kames Mekeda Hera, Kamei Eirem Be'eria, naked, means vulnerable. V'chein Kol Erva Shavikalos, Gili, nakedness, exposing, the Targum Bitko Da'ar, the weak spots, Kamei Bedek Abayas, Ru Abayas, the breaches, the broken parts, Abalei Digdik Leparish, Achai Loshna Mikra, but he's not precise in explaining the language. Okay, verse 10, so Yosef accuses them of being spies. And they say to him, Loi Adoni, no, my master, don't say we're spies. Your servants have come, we're here to buy food, we're on a shopping expedition. Loi Adoni, say McCain, don't speak like that. Because we came to buy food. 11, we are all sons of one man. We are righteous dudes, we're upright people. We were never spies, we don't work for the CIA. Rashi, Kulam b'nei ish echad nochnu, nitznisa bohem ruach hakodesh. They were enkindled with a spark of divine inspiration. Uchlalu imam. They said, all of us here, including him, are sons of one man. Shafhu ben Abim, he's also the son of the same man. So they said prophetic words without realizing it. Kainim amitim, we're honest people. Kain dibarto, Kain b'nei slavchad, David correct. Why did they say nochnu and not anachnu? Nochnu is missing an aleph because one is missing. verse 12, verse 13. No, 12. And he said to them, Lo, it's not true. You came to see the vulnerability of the land. Rashi, I have information that tells me that you came in into 10 different gates. Honest people are not afraid to come in the same gate. Why didn't you go in one gate? You're hiding something. So they were forced to tell him. They said, we, your servants, were once 12 brothers. B'nei ish echad, sons of one man, Be'eretz Canaan, back in Canaan. V'hinei, and behold, Hakotein, the youngest one, Esavinu Hayom, is today with our father. V'ho echad einenu, and one disappeared. And that's why we entered into 12 different gates, or 10 different gates, because we're looking for him. Because of that one that disappeared, we spread ourselves throughout the city, to look for him. Now you have the answer. So Yosef said to them, aha, you see I'm right, you're spies. You're gathering intelligence. Yosef said to them, that's exactly what I said to you. Lame are saying, you are spies. 14 Rashi, that's exactly what I said. You're spies. It's true, it's established. That's the simple meaning. And the Medrash tells us that he began to interview them. He began to ask a series of questions. And he said, hypothetically, just hypothetically. If you found him, and they'll tell you that they want $1 billion for him. Tivdu, will you redeem him? They said, sure. And if they say to you that they're not going to return him to you for all the money in the world, for all the tea in China, what are you going to do? They said to him, honestly, with this intent we came, to kill, or lehorig, or to be killed, we have to take our brother home. He says, no, that's what I told you. You guys are dangerous people. He said to them, that's what I'm saying to you. You guys are a bunch of murderers. You're hitmen. Yosef had this Kiddush cup that he made Kiddush with. He said it's his magic cup. He said, I see in my magic cup. Two of you, you're such innocent-looking people. 2 of you destroyed the big city of Shechem. And in general, the Medrash tells us that he used his magic cup to tell them everything he knew from his childhood. He sounded like he was brilliant. And they were impressed. The Baal HaTurim says, when he says, one disappeared, so Yosef said to them, my magic cup says to me, the guy who disappeared, his name is Yosef. And they were very impressed. They said, we got to get a hold of one of them magic cups. So Yosef says to them, 15, this will be the litmus test. Paro, I swear by Pharaoh's life. Rashi explains, the commentaries explain, whenever Yosef swore falsely, he swore by Pharaoh's life. Worst comes to worst, Pharaoh dropped dead. It's not so terrible. If you come out of here alive, unless your little brother comes here, we are insisting that your little brother come here, because I'll tell you something, we don't believe you have a little brother. We think you made up the whole story. It's part of your CIA cover story. 15, if Pharaoh shall live, when Joseph swore falsely, he swore always by Pharaoh's life. If you go out of here alive. The Medrash brings down a parable of a goat which wandered into the home of a very poor woman. The poor woman took the goat and slaughtered it and skinned it, and then took the meat and put it in her bed and covered it to look like a baby. And then the soldiers came in and they said, where's the goat? She said, I swear I never saw the goat. If I saw the goat, I'm going to take that and cut it piece by piece and eat it, meaning a baby. But she swore that she would cut the goat meat piece by piece and eat it. So that's a trick oath. That was Joseph's oath. He swears by the life of Pharaoh. Then he took out insurance on Pharaoh's life. 16, Shilcho mikem echad. Therefore, I suggest to you that you send one of your brothers, and take your other brother that you allegedly claim is alive. V'yatem and Ya'al heyasu, you're going to be locked down. V'yibachanu divrechem, will test your words. Ha'emesitchem, to see if you're telling the truth. If the guy we send comes back with another brother. And if not, chei paro, by the life of Pharaoh, kimeraglim atem, you guys are spies. Ha'emes itchem, 16 Rashi, im emes itchem, if you're telling the truth. Therefore it has a ha'emes, shukamei b'loshen tema. It's question mark. To be you, and if you will not bring him, chei paro, then as Pharaoh lives, kimeraglim atem, you guys are a bunch of spies. There's a Baal HaTurim here on 15. It says in 15, Ki im bivo achichem hakoton heina, that if your younger brother comes here, says the Baal HaTurim, take the word bivo. The numerical value of the word bivo is, base is 2, 2 and 2 is 4, vav is 6, is 10, aleph is 1, is 11. Bivo is 11. You're not going to leave here until there are 11 brothers amongst you, not 10. And that's the bivo, symbolizes 11. 17, Vayesov Pesam, and he placed them all, El Mishmar, into prison, Shleishes Yomim, for 3 days, just to get their attention. Mishmar Beis Asurim is the prison. He also wanted them to get a taste of what he went through. 18, Vayomer Aleim Yosef, and Yosef said to them, Bayom HaShlishi, on the third day, Zeis Asu, this is what you need to do. Vichyu, so you should live. Es Holikim, Ani Yorei, I fear God. And in tomorrow's portion, he tells them, I have a plan. You have to take the food home and bring back Binyamin. I'll keep one of you here as a hostage. He takes Shimon, so Shimon and Levi should not be together because Shimon and Levi made up a dangerous team. And so on, as we will learn in tomorrow's portion. The fifth portion of Miketz, chapter 42, verse 19. Yosef is having conversation with his brothers, accusing them of being spies. They say, we're not spies, we're honest people. And he says, if you're honest people, why'd you come into 12 different doors? And they said, well, we had a brother, he was lost. And Yosef said, sure, my magic cup says his name was Yosef. What would you do if you found him? We would redeem him. And if they would refuse, well, we would either kill or be killed. And he says to them, aha, I told you you're spies. He throws them into prison for 3 days. And 3 days later he says, okay, let's talk. Now that you've gotten your attitude adjusted a little bit. 19, Im kenim atem, if you're righteous dudes, if you're upright and correct men, then this is what we're going to do. Achichem echod ye'oser beveis mishmarchem. One of your brothers will be locked up in prison. We're going to hold him hostage. V'atem and Yal, he was from Nolans. Yal, lechu haviyu. You go home and bring and deliver shever, the food, the grain. Rabin botechem, for the famine of your household, to cure the famine in your household, you go deliver the grain. But one of you, I need to hold on here as a hostage to make sure that y'all come back. 19, beveis mishmarchem sha'atem asurim b'ei achshav. It doesn't mean that he built a special jail for them, but he means in your prison where you've been imprisoned. V'atem lechu haviyu, leveis avichem, to your father's house. Shever, rabin botechem, mashikanisem l'rabin anshi botechem, whatever you purchased to satiate the hunger of your household. 20, but I'm telling you that you told me a whole story, that you have a younger brother. To tell you the truth, I don't believe you have a younger brother. I think you made it up. But just to prove that you are upright dudes, you have to bring your younger brother. He was dying to see Binyamin. So that your words be verified, so that you not die, because otherwise I'm happy to kill you. We kill people here every day, no problem. And that's exactly what they did. He put one of them in jail, prison, and he sent the other ones home with the food. They'll be verified and confirmed. Like the word omein comes from the word to verify. But before they leave, there's some conversation. They didn't realize that Yosef, they didn't realize that he speaks Hebrew, because he didn't look Jewish. He looked Egyptian under all those robes. He wore one of them turbans. I'm not sure about the turban because I was very young then. One said to the other, but we are guilty. It's all because alachinu. It's all about our brother. God is punishing us because of what we did 22 years ago to our brother. Asheroinu, we saw tzoras nafshenu, the affliction of his soul. When he pleaded with us, he says, please don't throw me into that pit. There's snakes and scorpions. Please don't sell me as a slave. And we didn't listen. Al Kain boy Leinu, therefore, has come upon us once again. Hatzora hazais, this trouble. We are in deep trouble. Good morning. We're in deep trouble because of the fact that we didn't listen to the pleas of our brother. Rashi, Abel, Kitagome, Bekushta, in truth, Abel Bram, in the south of Israel, they say Abel for Bram, but in truth. The accent is on the base, because it's past tense, because it already came. Had befallen us. My father, of blessed memory, used to tell us the story when he taught us this portion, that, every year when we read the story in the synagogue, we study it, it's a very sad story, the story of the sale of Yosef. And there was a woman who would sit in the balcony, in the women's gallery, many years ago in the synagogue, and every time the Balkori, the Torah reader, would come to this part, she would start wailing and crying hysterically. And in fact, year after year, the Balkora would stop, because no one could hear him reading while she cried. So the Balkora would stop, she would have her cry, and then they would go on. They came to the part that she always cried, the Balkora stops, and she's not crying. And the Balkora says, no, and she's not crying. And somebody yells out, no, it's time to cry. And she says, I'm not crying anymore. Last year I said, Yosef, don't hang out with your brothers, they're bad people. Did he listen? No, I'm not crying anymore. Verse, that's on the lighter side. My dad of blessed memory used to share the story. So Reuven responded to them all in Hebrew, saying in front of Yosef, not thinking he understood, didn't I tell you? Saying, I told you don't do it. Did you listen? Nah, you never listened to me. You didn't listen. V'gam domei hine nidrosh, and now his blood is being demanded from us. The mud and the blood and the beer. V'gam domei esin v'gam ribuyim. Whenever the Torah uses the word es or gam, there's always something to teach us, an amplification. Domei v'gam dam hazaken, his blood that we poured, that we spilled, and also the blood of the old man, our father. Our father also ate his heart out for the past 22 years. And now this crazy king is out to get us because God is sending us a message. Now, this is all nice and good, but 23, V'heim lo yodu, they had no idea. They didn't know ki Shemei Yosef, that Yosef, sihabli ivrit, that he understood. Shemei means understood, comprehended. Why didn't they understand? Because whenever they spoke in Hebrew. Yosef spoke in Egyptian, and there was an interpreter. Who was the interpreter? Yosef's son, Menashe. Keep the business of the family. Why shouldn't the kid have a couple bucks? Ki ha-melitz, it's a government program. Ki ha-melitz beinesa, because there was an interpreter between them. Menashe was the interpreter. Earmarks. 23, V'heim lo yadu ki Shemei Yosef. What does Shemei mean? Mavin l'shainam, understands their language. Well, the fun of Hayom Medabrim came, and in his presence they spoke because they had no idea that he understands Hebrew. He didn't look Jewish. Ki ha-melitz beinesam, ki Hayom Medabrim imay, because when they spoke with him, ha-melitz beineim, there was an interpreter between them. Ha-yodea who knew Lashon Ivri Hebrew, Lashon Mitzvah Egyptian. Ha-melitz divrei Yosef, and interpreted their words to Yosef. V'divrei Yosef lahem, and Yosef's word to them. L'kach ha-yusvurim, therefore they thought Shen Yosef makil b'Shen Ivri, that Yosef doesn't understand Hebrew. Ha-melitz was Menashe, Yosef's older son, Menashe. So the fact is he did understand, and the fact is he heard them blaming each other, and he heard their remorse and regret. It touched him. 24, Vayisev me'aleim, and he turned away from them. Vayef, and he cried. He went into the private chamber, he had a good cry. Vayoshav aleim, and he returned to them. Vaydaber aleim, and spoke with them. Vayikach meitam Shimon, he took Shimon from them. The reason he took Shimon is because, as we learned earlier, Yosef had this magic goblet. At least he said it was magic. And he told them all their secrets. The reason he knew it is because he remembered it from when he was a kid. And he said, I see in my magic goblet that two of you destroyed the city of Shem. You and you. So he took Shimon so that Shimon not be there together with Levi. Otherwise he was concerned they'll destroy the entire Egypt. So he took Shimon by yesterday, and he locked him up. He put him in prison. Le'einehem, before their eyes. 24, Vayisev me'aleim, he moved away from them. Nisakach me'aleim, he went away from them. Shelo yiruhu b'yich, he didn't want them to see him crying. Because he saw, he heard how remorseful they were. As Shimon, why Shimon? Says Rashi, who the simple sense, Shimon is the one of the brothers who put him in the pit. They cast him into the pit. He's the one that said to Levi, here comes the dreamer. To separate him from Levi. Perhaps they'll both plot to kill him, and if they would want to, they would probably be able to succeed. They were tough guys. He only locked Shimon up to their eyes, but once they left and went on their way, Yosef, had Shimon brought out of prison, and he put him in the Cairo Marriott and gave him food and drink, and then gave him a bar ticket to have a drink at the bar. 25, Yosef gave the word. They filled up their satchels, their vessels, with food. And Yosef also gave the word unbeknownst to them, to return their money, put it in the money section in their bag. They all had these satchels, these suitcases that carried grain. So he had them also put the money back in the money pouch. And also to give them tzeda, some food, ladorech, for the road. When I was a kid, we used to say tuna fish sandwiches. But today, they say sushi. He gave them some sushi for the road. And they did exactly that. They filled up their satchels with grain and gave them sushi for the road. A couple Diet Cokes. Verse 26, Vayisu, and they loaded up Shivram, their grain, al chamereim, upon their donkeys, and they left from there. Now, on the road, 27, they stopped in a rest area. One of them opened up his satchel. Loses, to give Mispay some food. Lachamere, to his donkey. Bamolin, in the hotel. They stopped in a Motel 6. Vayar es Kaspay, and he almost died when he saw his money. His money was in the money pocket, in the satchel. He said, this is not good. They're going to accuse us of taking food without money during a famine. That's a capital crime. This is not good. This is tsurus with a capital T. Rashi 27, Levi opened up his satchel. Why is he called Ha'echad? Because he was lonely, because his bosom buddy Shimon was gone. Shenisha Yochid Mishimon ben Zugay was left alone from Shimon. Ba'molin b'makom shalom b'layla, where they slept that night. Amtachta who saw it's his satchel. So Levi says Elechad to his brothers, we got troubles. Hushav Kaspi, my money has been returned. V'gam hine ba'amtachti, it's sitting right here in my satchel. And their hearts left them. Vayecherdu, and they began to tremble. Ish eloche, one to another, lamer, saying, Mazais also elikim lona, what is God doing to us? This is not good. I have the money and the grain. Mazes also the kimlana lavienu, to lead us, lead the alila, to this accusation, this whole new accusation. Obviously, the money was returned to us because they're trying to entrap us with a plot that we stole grain during a famine. Serious sin. 29, they came back to their father Yaakov in the land of Canaan, and they conveyed to him everything that happened to them, Lamar saying, they say, Pop, you ain't going to believe this. Diber Ha'ish, the man, Adene Haaretz, he is the master of the land. He spoke, he told it with us, koshes, very roughly, tough talk. When he placed us, he took us as if we're spies, spying the land. And we said to him, heck no, we're not spies. We are upright people. We were never spies. Shepherds, yes. Spies, no. 32, we were once 12 brothers, all the sons of our father. One disappeared. And the youngest, is today. With our father, in the land of Canaan. And he, this crazy guy, said to us, the man said to us, the master of the land, with this I will know. This is the litmus test. This will tell me that you are upright, just men. One brother you must leave with me as a hostage. That's Shimon. And the food to satiate the famine of your houses, take, and go. But you must bring your little brother, a lie to me. Then and only then will I know that you're not spies, that you're upright people. And if you do that, if you come with your little brother, then I'll give you back your other brother Shimon. Yes, so you can go shopping, you can go do business, do whatever you want to, go to the mall, and have a good day. But you have to bring your little brother Binyamin. Rashi, to save it, where you can tour, you can go around, merchandise, business, because merchants go round and about looking for business, looking for a deal. 35, as they were unloading their satchels at home, they find out that not only Levi had his money, but every single one of them had his bundle of money in the money satchel, in the money pocket. When they saw the bundles of their money, Hema, both they, and their father, they were terrified, petrified. This is problems. 36, so Yaakov, their father, again, who had just gone through 22 years of terrible distress and mourning. So Yaakov now had it. And he says to them, you have made me bereaved. And the word bereaved is an expression when, God forbid, somebody, may it not happen to anyone, loses a child. Yosef is not here. He went 22 years ago. Now Shimon is not here. He has Binyamin tikochu. Now you want to take Binyamin? Alai, haya, chulanu, all this stuff is happening to me. I can't take it anymore. This teaches us that all along he suspected them. Shema haragu emacharu ki. He thought maybe that they sold Shimon or killed Shimon like they did to Yosef because something wasn't kosher here. Shikaltem kol mi shabonav avudim. God forbid when somebody loses children, kori shakol is called bereaved. There's the teaching we learned earlier on the word olai, which we studied earlier when the word olai was used earlier, that olai is an acrostic for the three major troubles that Yaakov had in his life. Ayin stands for Esav, the troubles with Esav. Lamed stands for Lavan, and Yud stands for Yosef. I had enough with the Esav, Lavan, Yosef troubles I can't handle anymore. 37, Reuven, the oldest, now takes charge. Reuven says to his father, Lamar, saying, listen, let's be honest, we got to go back down. We need more food. That's the only place there is food. I guarantee that we will bring Shimon back. I guarantee we'll bring Binyamin back. And if I won't, Eshnei bonai tomis, I give you permission to kill my two sons. You're worried about your two sons? You can kill my two sons. If I will not bring him back to you, give him, meaning Binyamin, al yodi into my hands, va'ani ashivenu elecha. I will return him to you, guaranteed. Yaakov said, or as Rashi says, Yaakov said to Reuven, you're an idiot. Your children are my grandchildren. You think I'm going to be consoled if I kill my grandchildren too? You got to change your medication. My son will not go down with you. Because his brother Yosef died already. He's the only one that was left from his mother. And I'm concerned that an accident will befall him, especially hanging out with you guys. On the road, that you will go upon, and you will cause to be brought down as my gray hairs. Be yogain with anguish, into the grave. Forget it, it's not happening. I'd rather not have any food. 38, my son will not go down with you. He didn't accept Reuben's words. He said, this guy Reuben, he's a firstborn, but he's an idiot. He's saying he's going to kill his sons. His sons are not mine. His children are my grandchildren, says the Medrash. But the fact of the matter is, chapter 43, the famine was very heavy in the land. It came to pass, verse 2, Kasher Kilu, Lecha, when they finished eating, as Hasheber, the food, the grain, which they brought, Mi Mitzrayim from Egypt, their father said to them, Shubu, hey guys, go back, purchase for us some more food. Rashi, Kasher Kilu Lecha, Yehuda Amar Lahem, Yehuda said, let's not fight with the old man. Tino Lazok, let's wait for the old man. Tichla, Pasmin Abayas, until there's no more food in the pantry. Then he'll tell us to go buy food. Kasher Kilu Kad Sheitziu, when they ceased. They had sufficient. Kasher Kilu Agmalishis, Betugim Katsapiko. Kishasasa de Bukamogomar Siyosam. Abelzeh, Kasher Kilu Lecho, Kasher Tama Echelu, when the food ceased. Betagim Kasheitziu, when they ceased. Verse 3, Yehuda said to him, Lamer, saying, we would love to go buy food, but, as we told you earlier, Hoi, hey, Bono, Aish, Lamer, the man, severely warned us, saying, you shall not see my face. Bilti achicha mitchem, without your little brother. You touch my car, break your face. As they said in Jersey, ha'ed heyid lashon hasra, witness. Shestam hasra masrebe. If they aid him, in general warnings are given before witnesses. That's why the word ha'ed is used, because it comes from the term witness, warning. Do not see me, without your brother. Only when your brother is with you. Let the verse go according to its context. He doesn't follow the simple interpretation. But in any event, that's what it means. Verse 4, so Yehuda says, if you agree to send our brother with us, Nerda will go down. We'll purchase food for you. But if you do not consent to send Binyamin, we cannot go back down to Egypt. Why? Because the man said to us, you shall not see my face. Don't look at my face. Without your brother. There's no way we can go without our little brother. 6. So Yisrael, Yaakov said, let me ask you something. Why did you do this terrible thing to me? Did you have to open up your big mouths and tell the man that you have another brother? I mean, what were you having, coffee and dupars? What do you need to tell him stories? What does it have to do with your other brother? How does he know you have another brother? What, do you look on Facebook? Rashi, 7, so they said, the man asked us, Lo knew all about us, and about our family. Lamar saying, tell me, said the king, is your father still alive? And then he asked, you have a brother? We told him, according to all of his questions. We were just trying to be responsive. Would it ever enter our minds? How could we know? That he would say, bring down your brother. This man's crazy. But he's in charge. Rashi, our family. Medrash the Medrash says, this guy looks in his magic cup and he tells us what we did in our cribs and carriages when we were babies, which park we played in, which preschool we went to. We told him we have a father, we told him we have a brother. We were responsive to his questions. We had to be responsive. You can't not answer the king's questions. How should we know? That. The word ki has 4 different meanings. That. How should we know that? He would tell us. 8. So Yehuda finally said, El Yisrael, love to Yisrael, to Yaakov his father, Shilcha Nariti. Yehuda knew that Reuven didn't do too well with his approach. Yehuda tried a different approach. Send the young man with me. V'nakuma, we will rise up. V'neilecha, we will go. V'nichya, we will live. V'loi nomos, we will not die. Gam anachnu, both us, gam ato, as well as you. Gam tapenu, our children. I guarantee it. V'nichya, nitznitza, v'ruach HaKodesh, the divine spirit was kindled within him. Yehuda is telling him that your spirit will be rekindled through this trip, because between the lines, Yehuda doesn't even know what he's saying. You'll get to see Yosef. This will lead you back to Yosef. That when Yaakov heard that Yosef was alive, then his spirit became rekindled. But almost let us not die barov through famine. And Yehuda argues logically with his father. Binyamin, when it comes to Binyamin and your concern for his safety, Sofik Yitofis, yes, it's true. Perhaps he will be taken and not returned, but Sofik Le Yitofis, perhaps not. But we, surely we're all going to die from hunger. We don't go. You always have to set aside the doubt and deal with what is certain. What is certain is if we don't go now, we're running out of time. We're all going to die. Says Yehuda to his father, I will guarantee his safe return. You will demand his safety back from me. What's the guarantee? I promise you that if I do not return him safely to you, bring him back to you, and set him before you alive and well, then I will have sinned to you all of the days, as Rashi says, in this world and in the world to come. I'll bring him back to you alive. think there's a beautiful Jackie Mason line where he says, they always come to us, the simple people, the cops, the police come and say, criminals, wanted, dead or alive. He says, I should go hunt the criminal. He says, dead, I'll find him. Alive, let them find him. Yehuda says, I will sin to you in the world to come as well. Verse 10, Yehuda says to Yaakov, Ki, because, he says in this famous verse, Lule hisma monu, had we not lingered and procrastinated up to now, Kiato shavnu zeh pamoyim, we could have been up and back twice, or down and back twice. All this time that we've been procrastinating with fear and deliberation, we could have been to Egypt and back 2 times. Rashi, Lule hisma monu al yotcha, because of you. Kvar hayinu shavim im Shimon, we would already be back with Shimon. And you wouldn't have been upset all this time. Why do I say it's a famous verse? Because this verse is also used in the service of the Jew returning to God. The word shavnu comes from the word tshuva, to return. The word lule is elul backwards. Ki lule hisma'amonu, that the service of elul, aleph lamed vav lamed, the service of the Jew in the 30 days preceding Rosh Hashanah, ki ato shavnu zeh pamoyim, we return to Hashem twice, that there's a double form of tshuva. On the high holidays, there's the Rosh Hashanah tshuva, which is coronating God as a king and accepting his commandments. There's the Yom Kippur tshuva, which is the regret and the remorse and the alchet. Kilule Yisma'amono, the idea of Elul is a double approach of return to Hashem, and that is the gift of tshuva. Back to the text. 11. So Yisrael, their father, said to them, Yaakov, their father, said, seeing that he had really no other answer, he says, Im Kain, in that case, Ephei Zeis Asu. This is what I think you should do. Go prepare a fantastic gift presentation for the king. Take mizimras ha'oretz, of the best fruits of the land, bichleihem, and put them in the best vessels, in silver vessels, and carry down a gift to the man. What I would suggest you do, he gives them a list. He says, don't go to Ralph's, go to Gelson's. Ma'atzori, a little bomb. He didn't need a bomb like B-O-M-B, because the dogs would catch him. Ma'advash, a little honey, neches, some spices, valoit, and ladanum, botnim, nuts, ushkedim, and almonds, or pistachios, as we'll see. He said, make them up this fancy fruit platter. 11, Eifei, Lashon Yeser, who, this is redundant, Lasak and Milah Lashon Ibri. It's a word, an ornamental, poetic word. In Cain, in that case, says, Dakas Lases, I will be forced to act. Shashachani, I'll send Binyamin with you. Sarachani Laksal Lavakish, I have to come up with a scheme. Lahashiachim, to propose to you. Leimarani Zeis Asu, bring him this gift. Mizimra Sa'aretz, Midim Mishabach Ba'ara, of that which is praised in the land. Shakal Mezamram Olav, everybody praise it. Shubalo Elam, the Chais is Shaiba, wax, others say it's spices. Botnim, Loyadati, I'm not sure what they are. Or Beferish, Aleph, they shall Rabbi Mochir, or Isi, pistachio nuts, v'deimerli shehem, afarik skin, peaches, whatever. Now the big question is asked, if it's a famine and there's no grain, how do we have pistachio nuts and peaches and spices and all kinds of goodies? The answer is there was no basic necessities to feed people, but for a lot of money, you could get some delicacies which can't keep you alive. You can't eat pistachio nuts day after day after day. This is something that you have to spend a ton of money on, and you get a little bit, but that's not what you could feed your house with. That's one of the answers that are found. 12, the chesef mishnah, and double money, take with you. Why? Yaakov is talking about inflation. We're concerned that by this time the price of grain doubled because the famine ain't getting any better. So you got to take twice as much money. What cost $1 now probably costs $2. Furthermore, in addition to double money to purchase, and the money that was returned in the money section of your satchels, Toshivo B'yetchem, carry back in your hands. Ulai Mishgahu, we sure hope it was a mistake and it's not the plot. The Chesed Mishnah Pishnayim Korishin, double, twice as much as before. Chul B'yetchem Lish Barechel, to buy food. Shem Hukar Ashar, perhaps the price has risen. Supply and demand. Ulai Mishgahu Shem Hamamun Alabayas Shchei Shegik, perhaps the guy in charge of the house forgot it inadvertently. 13, V'yasachichem, and your brother Binyamin, kochu, take him, Bekumu, and arise, Shuvu alish, go back to the man, Bekel, Shadei, 14, may God Almighty, Yitin lechem rachmim, give upon you, place upon you compassion, Lefnei aish, before the man, V'shilach lachem, so that he may send and release unto you, Esachichem, Acher, your other brother, simply meaning Shimon, but in a deeper sense, even Yosef, V'yas Binyamin and Binyamin, V'ani, as far as I'm concerned, forget about me, kasher shachalti, as I'm already bereaved, shachalti, I'm just going to be bereaved, and forget it, and it's the end of the world, forget about me. Now you're lacking nothing, except for prayer. I will pray for you. He has sufficient in his mercy, and he has sufficient power in his hands to give. He should give mercy. This is the simple meaning. The Medrash says, whoever said to his world, enough, perhaps he can say, enough to my troubles. Shakatati minu urai. I haven't rested since I was a young man. Tzoras Lavan, the tzoras, the troubles of Lavan. Tzoras Esav, the troubles of Esav. Tzoras Rachel, the troubles of Rachel. Tzoras Dina, the troubles of Dina. Tzoras Yosef. Tzoras Shimon, Tzoras Binyamin. Enough with the tzoras. Let him release to you, as the Targum says. Released from his bondage. That's where they're going. Acher is another brother. Ruach HaKodesh Nizrika here was a Holy Spirit of prophecy, was injected into him. The Rabbis Yosef, then another brother is going to be sent back as well, meaning news of the fact that Yosef is alive. Ani, as far as I'm concerned. Forget about me. Ad shuvchem, until you return. Shachol misafik, I will be bereaved in doubt. I'm already mourning. Kasher shachelti mi Yosef u mi Shimon. As I was bereaved of Yosef and Shimon, shachelti mi Binyamin. I am bereaved of Binyamin. I will think the worst. But why don't you go and get it over with? Verse 15. And the men took this gift. And the double money. They took in their hands. We as Binyamin as well as Binyamin. When they rose up, when they descended, they went down Mitzrayim to Egypt. And they stood before Yosef. And they took Binyamin, in Aramaic, taking an object and taking a person is a different word usage. Something taken by the hand is nesiv. Something taken verbally. Anyway, that is the end of today's Chumash portion. Good morning. Chapter 43, verse 16, in the portion of Miketz, Friday's portion of Miketz. So we learn that finally the brothers came back down to Egypt, this time with Binyamin, bringing a beautiful gift for Yosef, hoping against hope that everything works out. Now we read in 16, Vayar Yosef Itom, as Binyamin, Yosef, the viceroy, the king, saw Binyamin with them, his baby brother. Binyamin was the only one of the brothers who was a full brother, sharing both father and mother. Vayomer, and he said, La'asher al-Beisei, to his chief of staff, Have yaso anoshim, invite the people, bring these men, haboisa, to my private residence. Utveyach tevach, and call the shoichet, let him slaughter the animals. V'hochein, let him prepare a beautiful meal. Ki, because, and this is where Spielberg got the name of the movie, E.T., Yechlu ho'anoshim batzorayim, because with me, see, Yosef said, tell the people to come home, E.T., batzorayim, at noon, I'm inviting everyone for a royal luncheon in my private residence. 16, utveyach tevach b'hochein. Rashi struggles with the grammar here. It would be like saying, and slaughter the animals and prepare the meat. This is not a command. This means lunch. It's the first formal meal. Bilshain Arami in Aramaic. Throw the dog his meal. This means a main meal. But the Targum's regular translation of tzarayim is tiara. So this means it was a fancy, full luncheon meal. 17, and the chief of staff did kasher Omar Yosef. The man did as Yosef said. And the man, the chief of staff, escorted the men, meaning Yosef's brothers, to his private residence. Now that obviously terrified them. Why are they being taken to his private residence? Customers are not taken to the viceroy's private residence. The most people do for customers is they walk them out to the parking lot and help them put the stuff in their trunk. Nobody is taken to the private residence. 18, Vayiru ho'anoshim, and the men were terrified. Kihuvu, that they were brought, Beis Yosef, into the house of Yosef, Vayomru, and they said to themselves, they said to each other, Al dvar hakesef, this must be because of the money. Hashav, which was returned, Ba'am techesenu, in our satchels, Batchila, for the first trip. We learned that every one of the brothers found their full money in the money pouch, in their satchels. This must be because of the money. They probably realized at the end of the day that their cash registers didn't work out, didn't add up. So this must be why anachnu muvoyim, that we're being brought in. I'll bet you it's a plot. So that they may seek occasion against us, to attack us. I'll bet they intend to take us, la'avodim, as slaves, and our donkeys as well. You know, you arrest somebody for drugs, you take their cars. They're taking them and their donkeys. Must be what they're planning to do, they said to each other. Rashi, Vayidu, Ha'anoshim, and the men were afraid. Kosavu b'shnei yud, and the word Vayidu has 2 yuds, because 1 yud might mean, and they saw. 2 yuds means they were afraid. Targum, as the Targum says, udechilu, and they were afraid. In Aramaic, we find this in Tanya all the time. Dechilo udechima, fear and love. Ki huvu beis Yosef, that they're brought into Yosef's house. Vein derech shar haboyim lishbar bar. The other people who come to purchase grain, nobody lolans beis Yosef, spends the night in Yosef's house. This was an unusual thing. Kiyim, where did people sleep? Bapun dekoy shabayir. There were enough hotels in the city. Everybody was coming to Egypt, so a whole hotel business opened up. Vayiru, they were afraid. They knew for sure that this was a stepping stone towards arresting them. Into this house, so that they be able to develop upon us alilas, a false charge, hakesa, because of the money. That it should fall upon us. And uncles, who interpreted this ulis takapo alona, to seek false charges, a charge of something, taskufe milin, a false charges of words. But uncles didn't translate verbatim the words. Rashi is more honest with the words. Rashi always stays as close to the simple words. To assume superiority. The place that stood was destroyed, which means kingdom. They're trying to act like big shots upon us, against us. Verse 19, Vayikshu Eloish, so they approached the chief of staff, the guy who was in charge, Asher Beis Yosef, over Yosef's household. And they spoke to him, Pesach HaBoyas, at the gateway of the house. Maybe they could even avoid going inside. They spoke to him at the doorway. And they said, Bi Adoni, please, we beg of you, our master. Can we have a few words with you? This is the story. Originally, we came down to Egypt to buy food. That was the purpose of our trip. It means request, supplication. I pray. You must understand that we are very wealthy, successful, dignified people back home. We are movers and shakers and donors, and we help others. We have always been known to be giving others. But now, unfortunately, we're on the receiving end. We had to come here and buy food, imagine. But we want you to know, as happened, 21, it came to pass. Kivonu el hamolin, when we were on the way home, and we stopped in this hotel where we stayed. We opened up our food sacks, and we were shocked to see, astonished. Every one of us had his full money returned in the money pouch of the satchel. Our money in full weight. So we want you to know, we observed this, we're sure it's a mistake. You should know that we brought the money back. Don't you worry about a thing, it's all good. We're here, we're honest, we're good people. And we want you to know, 22, and we brought additional funds. We brought down Biyodenu in our hands, to buy food. We got plenty of money, as we learned in yesterday's portion. We're sure the price went up, inflation. We brought extra money, double money. Don't worry, money's no object. We have no idea, by the way, who put that money back in our satchels, but we found it. We're telling you before you tell us, and let's straighten it out, and it's all good. So the guy says, I have no idea what you're talking about. Everything tallied. The computers matched. He said, Sholem lachem, peace unto you. Al tiro, do not fear. Who put the money in your satchels? Must be Elokechem, must be your God. Maybe the God of your father. Nosa lachem gave you matmaina, a hidden treasure. In your satchels, kaspechem bo eli, your money came to me. All of our numbers worked out. Don't worry, it's all good. We're just here for lunch. Shimon and the chief of staff brought their brother Shimon, who had been taken as hostage, and he looked like he was alive, so they started to calm down. Things looked like they may be promising. 24, so the man, the chief of staff, brought them into the house of Yosef, and he gave water, and they washed their feet. And he gave food to their donkeys. Rashi, he kept bringing them closer because they kept moving towards the outside. By the time they finished, they were at the door. But he said, no, it's all good. They came after. 25, so they made ready the beautiful gift. Remember, Yaakov said, bring a gift. So they took out the various sterling silver trays, and they started placing the gift beautifully, making a presentation into the trays. Ad Yosef, they did that up to the time that Yosef would come home, Batsarayim at noon. Kishomu, because the word came down, Kishom yoichlu lochem, that they would be breaking bread with the king in his house. They adorned it with beautiful vessels. They brought azoints and azoints, the best vessels. 26, Yosef came home. So the first thing they did is they presented him with the gift that they had with them. They brought it into the house. Lo arza, and bowed to the ground. I'm sorry. They brought the gift into the house and they bowed down to the earth. 26, Haboisa, Miprezdar Letaklan, from the lobby, the vestibule, into the house proper, into the palace. 27, Vayishalohem, and Yosef asked them, Lisholem, how they are. Vayemer, and he said, Yosef said, Hasholem avichem, hazokein asher amartem, is your father, your old father, whom you talked about, is he okay? Ha'idenu chai, is he still alive? And of course, he was very eager to know that, but he can only put it in conversation lest they suspect that he has an ulterior motive. Vayemru, and they said, Sholem la'abdecha la'avinu, your servant, our father, is well, ha'idenu chai, he lives. Vayigdu, and they bowed, vayishtachavu, and they fell down on the ground in salute to Yosef. Vayigdu vayishtachavu al shila sholem, because of his asking about their welfare. Kida kivas kotke. Bowing means bowing the head. Hishtachavo mishtatech la'oretz, and hishtachavo means flat on the ground. There's a interpretation which says that Yosef, we know that Yosef lived 110 years. There's a commentary that says that Yosef was supposed to live 120 years. But he permitted his brothers to refer to their father 10 times in his presence as your servant, our father, and didn't stop them. He should have said to them, don't you call your father my servant. Have some respect. Where were you brought up, in Jersey? And because he didn't do that, he lost for each of the 10 times a year of his life, and that's why he only lived to 110. 29, good morning, he lifted his eyes. Vayar, and he saw, he gazed upon as Binyamin, his brother, Ben Imai, also son of his mother, not only son of his father, not only paternal brother, but also maternal brother, full brother. Vayomer, and he said, is this the little brother whom you told me about? Because when Yosef left, Binyamin was a kid. And now, 22 years later, Binyamin is a grown man, as we will learn in tomorrow's portion. He was a father of 10 children. He was all grown up. He had great tax deductions. Vayomar, and he said, Elikim yochnecha b'ni, may God be gracious unto you, my son. This was the bracha that Yosef gave to Binyamin. Rashi, why is Yosef giving this bracha to Binyamin? Elikim yochnecha b'ni, b'shar shvatim shamanu chanina, because the other tribes, we heard about God's grace being mentioned about them. As it says, Asher chonan Elikim es abdecha. Yaakov says to Esav, these are the children with which God has graciously blessed me. But when Yaakov said that to Esav, Binyamin adayin le'neilad, Binyamin was not born yet. Therefore, bercha Yosef, Yosef blessed Binyamin, b'chanina, with the word chanina, which is chen, which is grace, charisma, v'chuneka, may God bless you with grace. The name Yochanan comes from that, or Chana. That's a tremendous blessing of charisma and grace and success, and everybody should love you. That's the idea of Chanina, and that was the blessing which Yosef blessed his brother with. And the story goes on. It's a very riveting story, and we'll continue in tomorrow's portion. Good morning. We are pre-recording the Shabbat portion of Mikeitz, chapter 43, verse 30. Yosef sees Binyamin, his full brother, with all of his brothers, and he blesses him with grace, favor, charisma. And now we read verse 30. Vayimahar Yosef, and Yosef hurries, he hastens. Ki nichmeru rachmo ve'lochiv, because his compassion was aroused in an overwhelming manner towards his brother. Vayavakesh, and he had an urge, lifkes, to cry. He was about to burst out into tears. Vayavei hachadra, and he came into the chamber, into the room, into his private room. Vayef shoma, and he cried there. Rashi, ki nichmeru rachmo, why was he so overwhelmed with compassion? Because of the conversation that Rashi tells us from the oral law that they had. She'elei, Yosef asked Binyamin, Yesh lecha och me'ein, do you have a maternal brother? Amar le, he said, Och hayoli, I had a brother. Ve'eni yedeya hechen, who I have no idea where he is. Yesh lecha bonim, do you have any children? Amar le, he told him, Yesh li yud, I have 10 children. Amar le, he said, I have 10 sons. Do you have any sons? I have 10 sons. Amar le, he said to him, Mashmam, what are their names? Amar le, so he said, and he began to enumerate their names, Bela, Vecher, and so on. Amar le, so Yosef said to Binyamin, Ma tivon shel shemus halolu, what is the nature of these names? What are these names all about? What's the significance of these names? They're not normal, everyday names. Amar le, he said to him, Binyamin said to him, Kulam al shem achi, they're all named for my missing brother. V'hatzores asher mitzauhu, and the troubles which he encountered. The oldest one is Bela, shenivla bein ha'umas, because he was swallowed up somewhere amongst the nations of the world. Becher, shehaya becher li'imi, he was the firstborn to my mother. Ash Baal Sheshavei Kael, because he was captured by God. He was taken by God. Geira Shagor Bachsanya, he's living in a strange place. Vinamon, pleasant. Shayanoim B'Yesir, he was the most pleasant guy in the world. Eichi Varoish Ochi Hoya, he was my brother. Bereishi Hoya, and he was my head. Mupim, mipi ovi lomad, he learned, he studied Torah from the mouth of my father. He was my father's favorite student. V'chupim, from the word chuppah, shaleira chupasi, he didn't attend my wedding. V'leira isi es chupasei, and I did not attend his wedding. He didn't see my wedding, and I didn't see his wedding. V'ord, and then there's the last one, ord, sheyorad lebein ha'umas, he descended amongst the nations. Kideisa, all of these names are described in this manner, as we see b'meseches Sota, in the tractate of Sota, where it discusses the whole Yosef story at length. Miyad, immediately, Nichmeru Rachmav, his compassion was aroused, and he became overwhelmed, and he went into the antechamber to have a good cry. Nichmeru, he yearned, Nischamamu, were heated, of V'shein Mishnah, Lakim V'shal Zeisim, concerning one who warms the olives, of V'shein Arami, B'michmer Bisra, the meat is heated, of Amikra, Yireinu Kisanu Nichmaru, our skin, as by an oven it was heated. These are various usages of the word Nichmeru. Nischamamu, V'nikmetu Kmotim Kmotim, it was heated and shrank into many wrinkles, the skin, B'fnei Zalaf Yisra, because of the pangs of hunger, God forbid. Kein Derech Kol Or, that's the nature of skin. Kishem Echamim, say when it's heated, Nikmat v'nikvats, it becomes wrinkled and shrivels. Back to 31, Vayirchatz Panav, Yosef washed his face, Vayetzi, and he came out. Vayisapak, and he controlled himself. Vayemer, and he said to the people in his household, Simu lochem, bring the bread, bring the food. Vayisapak nis ameds, he strengthened himself, Velosh nafikim maginim, strong shields, chezek strength, v'cheinu maziach, afikim ripach. 32, Vayosimu, and they brought the food, lei levade, for him separately, v'lahem levadam, and for them separately, v'lamitzriyim ha'ich lamiter levadam, and for the Egyptians who were eating with him separately. Why? What's with this separate stuff? Ki lo yuchlon hamitzriyim lechel so ivrim lechem, because it was forbidden. It was impossible for the Egyptians to eat bread with the Jewish people. Ki seyeva hi lemitzrayim, because it was an abomination for Egypt. I guess good old-fashioned anti-Semitism. Ki seyeva hi dobor sonu yihu lemitzrayim. It's a hateful thing. Lechel so ivrim, to eat with Hebrews. Uncles nasan tam ledover. Uncles gives a reason, and I believe the simple reason, although I haven't checked Uncles, but I believe the simple reason is because the sheep was the deity of Egypt, and the Jewish people did business with sheep. 33, Vayeshvu lefanov, and they sat before him. Habacher ki v'cheirosei, the firstborn according to his birthright. V'atzoyer ki tzirosei, and the younger one according to his chronological birth order. So Yosef told them, Reuben, you sit here, Shimon next to him, Levi next to him. Vayismu anoshim, and the men marveled. They were shocked. They were astonished. Ishareyu, one to another. They said, wow, how does this guy know this? He would strike Bagabia, his goblet, his cup. V'keiri, he would proclaim, Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun, B'nei Machas, you were all the sons of one mother. Hasebuk, Haseder Azeh, sit in that order. She Seder Tel Desechem, which is the order of your birth. V'chein Kulam, he did the same thing for all of them. Kivan Shigia Binyamin, being that he came to Binyamin, Amar, he said, Zeh ein le'yem, this one has no mother. V'ani ein le'yem, and I also have no mother. Yesha Betzli, let him sit by me. 34, Vayisa mas eis, me eis ponav aleim, and gifts or portions were taken from him to them. V'ateirev mas as Binyamin, and the portion of Binyamin was greater. Mimasas kulam, all of them, chomesh yodes, by 5 times. Vayishtu, and they drank. Vayishkiru imei, and they were happy and merry with him. 34, mas'os, monos, portions, chomesh yodov, chelkeim echav, 1 portion corresponding to those of his brothers. Mas'os Yosef, Osnas, and Menashe, and Ephraim, and the portions of Yosef, Osnas, and Menashe, and Ephraim, were given to Binyamin as well. Vayishkiru imei, they drank to intoxication. Umiyim shemecharu, from the day that they sold him 22 years earlier. Leishasu yayin, they had not drank wine. Neither did he drink wine. And that day, Shasu, they did drink. Now we know why he drank, because he was reunited with his brothers. But why did they drink? So the commentaries say they had no choice. They were afraid to disrespect him. Chapter 44, verse 1. And he commanded Es Asher al Beisei Lemer, his chief of staff, saying, fill the men's satchels, maximum, with as much grain as they can carry, and V'sim kesef ish b'fiyam tachte. Once again, place their money back in the mouth of their satchel. Verse 2, V'yez givi'i, and my magic goblet, givi'a hakesef, the silver goblet. Tosim, I want you to surreptitiously place. bifi in the mouth, amtachas hakotin of the youngest brother, the ace kesef shivrei, along with his money. Vayas, and he did, the chief of staff did, kidvar Yosef, as Yosef commanded, asher diber, as he spoke. Rashi, Givi'i, it's a goblet, case orach, a tall cup. The Kaden lay Medinish Belaz, it's called Mandarin in Old French. 3, Habeker Eir, as soon as it was dawn and the light was up, Anoshim and the men Shulchu were escorted, Hema, both them, Bachamereim and their grain-laden donkeys. Hem Yotzu Esair, just as they left the city limits, like Hirchiko, they hadn't gone far. Yosef Omar, Lasher Al-Beisei, and Yosef said to his chief of staff, Kum Redeif Acharei Anoshim, rise up and pursue the men, Visaktam, and when you overtake them, V'Amartu Aleim, I want you to say to them, Lama Shilamtem Ro Tachas Teva, why did you repay evil for good? Why did you repay my good deeds with your evil? We're talking about the object with which my master drinks, meaning the goblet, the silver goblet. It's his magic cup with which he divines. Let me tell you guys, you did a terrible thing. That's what you should tell them. He overtook them. And he spoke with them. Exactly these words. 7, and they said to him, why should my master speak words such as these? Far be it from your servants to do this. We are upright, honest people. We don't steal goblets. Far be it from your servants. That would be a profane thing for us to do. Lashon Gnai would be a shanda for the neighbors. Targum chas la'abdoch, spare, God forbid, your servants. Chas meis HaKadosh Baruch Hu, may God spare. Yaleinu me'asizes, for upon us to do this. V'harbe yesh b'talmud chas v'sholem, the famous expression, God forbid. 8. Hein kesef Hashem etza'onu b'fiyam techesenu. If the money which we found in the mouth of our satchels last time around, heshiveinu elecha, we return to you. Me'eretz Canaan, we schlepped it all the way from Canaan. Ve'eich nignei mibeis adeinecha, how could we possibly steal from the house of your master kesef, silver, azov, or gold? It's preposterous. It's out of the question. We would never do that. Rashi says that the logic of verse 8 is called a kal v'chomer, where you establish a lighter fact, and then you say, if the lighter fact is true, then the more serious fact is certainly true. If we brought back the money, shows how honest we are, out of the question that we would steal goblets. Rashi, Hein kesef Hashem etza'onu, 8 Rashi, ze echad me'asara kal v'chomer, ha'amunim b'Torah. There are actually 10 different places throughout the Bible, throughout the Tanakh, that we find the kal v'chomer used in the written law. V'kulam b'nuyim mi'bereishis Rabbah, and the Medrash enumerates them all. Back to their statement 9, Asher yomotze itei me'abadecha b'meis, with whomsoever this goblet be found, that person will die. V'gam anachnu, and the rest of us, nihiyeh shall be la'adeni, to my master, la'avodim, as slaves. They were so certain that they didn't have the goblet. 10, Vayomer, and he said, the chief of staff said, Gam ata, even now, ki divreihem kenhu, according to your words, so shall it be. Asher yomotze itei, with whom it is found, yeh li oved, should be our servant. However, we don't need the rest of you. V'atem, and you, tiyu nikiyim, should be blameless. You can all go home. I only want the culprit. All of this was, of course, being done to set up Binyamin, who had the goblet, unbeknownst to him, and to see how the brothers will react to saving Binyamin. Ken Rashi, it's true, it should be as you say. Because you're all guilty. Because when there are 10 people, and a stolen object is found in the hands of one of them, they should all be arrested. It's called an accomplice. Aval, you're all accomplices. Aval ani eselachem lefnimi shuras adin. I'm going to go above and beyond the call of duty. Asher yimotze ite, the one with whom we will find the goblet, yeli obit, will be my slave. The rest of you, gegas untehei, go home. With great innocence, Vayamaru, they hastened. Vayoridu isha sampachte, they each took their satchel down, orza, to the ground. Vayiftechu, and in an orderly way, they opened ish sampachte, each one his satchel. 12, Vayachapes, and the chief of staff began to search. Bagodel heichel, I guess he was good at drama. He knew it was in the satchel of the youngest, so he started with the oldest, Uvakot and Kila, and he finished at the youngest. And when it came to the youngest, voila, Vayimotzei hagavia, he found the silver goblet, Bamtachas Binyamin, in Binyamin's sack. Vayikrusim leisam, they tore their garments. Vayames ish al chameirei, and they each loaded up their donkeys. Vayashubu ha'ira, and they returned to the city. Sorry. 13, Rashi, Vayames ish al chameirei, bales rayahaya, they were very strong men. They didn't have to help each other. Vayashubu ha'ira, metropolin ha'isa, it was a metropolis, a large city. Vaymer ha'ira, he says to the city, ha'ir kolshu, like it's a tiny town. Elakiir Baininus, to them it was like a small average city, Shal Yud Bnei Adam of 10 people, in Amachama. When it comes to war, they were ready to do whatever they have to do to go to war to save Binyamin. 14, Vayava Yehuda ve'echa beisa Yosef, and Yehuda, who was the strongest and leader amongst all the brothers, and his brothers came to the house of Yosef, who Adenu Sham, and Yosef was of course still waiting there. He knew what was coming. Vayiplu, the fun of Arza, and they fell before him to the ground. Why was he still there? Yosef was a busy guy. He had things to do, people to see, places to go. Rashi, Adenu Sham, 14, Shayamamtin Lohem, simple, he waited for them. 15, Yosef, and Yosef said to them, what is this deed that you've done? Certainly, surely you know that a man like me has divine knowledge. I have magical powers. I know exactly who stole it. Rashi, you know, that a distinguished person like me knows how to divine, and to know, midas through knowledge, and through logic, or understanding. You are the ones who stole my goblet. 16, Yehuda said, what shall we say to my master? Manadaber, what shall we speak? How shall we rationalize our situation? God has discovered the sin, the iniquity of your servants. Behold, we're ready to be servants, slaves to our Lord. Both us. Also, the person in whose hand the goblet was found. 16, we know that we didn't sin, but this must be divinely ordained. So this came about by God's plan. To bring this to us. The creditor found an opportunity to collect his note of indebtedness. Hashem has a note of indebtedness to us for what we did, and therefore, obviously, he's paying us back now. The word nitztadok comes from the expression tzedek. So the question is, in that case, what's a test doing there? Excuse me. The answer is, b'chein kol teva, similarly speaking, every word. Shetchilas yiseda tzadik, where the first letter of the root word is a tzadik, like here, tzedek. V'bo l'daber b'loshen mispoil, and when it takes the form of hispoil, a nispoil, nice and tes, b'mkein tov. So a tes goes in instead of a tov. But we don't put it before the first letter. Shall you say hateva of the root? So you can put in the middle of the main letters. Nitztadok, migizras tzedek. Tzedek becomes nitztadok with a tes. Other examples: v'yitztaba, migizras tzaba, v'yitztayiru, migizras v'tziramunim, v'yitztayadnu, migizras seda laderach. Those are some examples. V'teva shetchilos samach eshin, and a word that begins with a samach or a shin, kshimispoeles, when it's used in hispoel form, ataf mafredes, a tough separates the main letters. V'yis tabel hechalgav migizras sobel, mistakel habes bekarne migizras sochel. V'yishtamer chukes omri migizras shomer. V'sor meiro mishtelo migizras meidach yetzim shelo. Mistelo ba'ami migizras derech leislula. These are various grammatical examples. Back to the story, verse 17. Vayomer, Yosef says, Chaliloli, far be it from me, me'asezes, from doing this. I would never take you all as slaves. And this was part of the setup. Ish, tell you what I'm going to do. The man, asher nimtza hagaviyah biyodeh, in whose hand the goblet was found, who yiyeli oved, he shall be to me as a slave. Meaning Binyamin will be my slave. V'atem and Ya'al, alu l'sholem, gate gizun tehei, go back in peace, el avichem, to your father, I don't need you here. End of Chumash portion, continued in the Sunday's portion of the next portion, Vayigash. Good morning, welcome. Chapter 41, verse 1.